Hey folks, I'm here. My bad. All right. I did 2 shows today, so I had to rush to get over here. Okay. Before we start, let me read a few shout outs, a few what's ups and everything, and then we'll just jump right into it. Can you guys hear me? This is my sound check. Oh, turn the sound on. Hold on. Let me make sure the sound is right. Can y'all hear me now? I hope this is the right sound. I hope that mic is on. Is it mic on? There we go. Okay, sounds fine. Cool. All right. Let me go up to the top. Sorry, y'all. Deanna Penner, happy Sunday, Calvin. Love your perspective so much, and I love when catch you live. Will you ever do calls? I've been planning to shift how I do the lives, where I want to start using the software so I can start actually including visuals. I love these lives, but I'm sure people sometimes get tired of just seeing me and there's like no supporting visuals to push my arguments and stuff. The calls, it's a thought. The only challenge I think I run into is because we already have such very intense topics. I already know some of them calls, it's going to be people on there ready for war. And I don't know if I got the energy for it, because at that point I'm in I said what I said mode. So we'll see. Let me see. What up, Kira? She said, all right, we're ready. Shout out to Vine and Branches. Let's see. Latoya, what up? Fearless Love, what up? Jasmine, what up? If I skip you, please don't take it personal. I'm just scrolling really quick. Avocado Queen, what's up? Have Hope, Wheezy Jefferson, Tracy Johnson, Sage, D. Bradford, Tyler Hackner, Kira, I think I said, Nicole Smith, Lexi 192, Felicia Michelle. Let's scroll. Shout out to everybody. Shout out. All right. Shout out to New York. Primpum Pal, New York, or NYC by Tokyo Co. All right. Ashley George. Alan Lewis, what's up? Ayana J. I was in the IG live and your expressions when Flo was talking had me cracking up. If you weren't on the IG live, you don't know what we're talking about, but it was interesting. She's cool people. I've accepted that every now and then. I'm not going to always see things the same way other people do, but I think she means well. Let me see. Okay, I want to go ahead and start because we got a lot to cover. So we'll start off light while I transition into some of the heavier stuff, because there's a lot to cover. I don't know if we'll be able to get to all of it. I'm gonna tell y'all there's not enough hours in the day. Like between trying to take care of the, I'm doing a short film. We start shooting that next week. And then there's some other changes that I'm making this week, which would be pretty cool. You guys will figure out what it is when it's time. And some other things going on. I'm like, man, that's just not enough hours in the day. I'm kind of sleepy. I feel sleep deprived because I feel like I've just been on the go for like 2-3 weeks, especially prepping for the shoot and everything like that. But anyway, somebody was asking me, just to start off light, and like I said, I'm not the biggest holiday person, but I do eat a meal when it's a holiday. Somebody was saying, like, what is my least favorite thing in regards to like Thanksgiving or Christmas meals or holiday meals when everybody gets together? Me, I'm not a cheese person, so I don't like mac and cheese. I'll eat it every blue moon. Like if it's the kind that's like that baked kind where you take it out the pan, you can like slice it. I'll eat that on occasion, but I don't really eat cheese that often. So I've never been a big cheese person. And even as a kid, I'd never liked dressing until my godmom made it this one time. And I was like, okay, we can try it now. When I was a kid, like dressing was like something I used to put it in a napkin. Like little kids used to put the food they didn't want in a napkin and ball it up and try to throw it away. That was me back then. So yeah, let me see. What are some things y'all will not touch? Like y'all just absolutely not doing it. Amber Stasher said, you got a new MacBook. Guessing that's the old one in the back. Oh no, I'm still on the same one. That's just my work laptop. No, I do want to get a new MacBook though. It's time. This thing is, like I said, it's on its last leg. It has been through a web series. I think any YouTube video I've made after 2013 is on this one. Any 2 albums and another one that's down the pipeline. The podcast, some film projects I do for different corporations and stuff. Companies pay me to make video content. This current short film project, I won't be doing the editing. Thank God, we have a team of like 15 people. So I really the short film, I just wrote it. And there's a whole team of other people doing all the logistics. But yeah, this MacBook, I bought this, or I got this in 2013. So it's been around for a decade, and I'm appreciative that it's still hanging on, but it's ready to tap out, and I'm ready to let it retire. So once I get my money right after I finish paying for the short film and some other things I'm doing, I'm definitely buying a new MacBook. All right. Let me see. What did y'all say y'all weren't touching? Y'all said no ham. Okay. It's potatoes. Potato salad. It depends who made it and what it's like. So I knew folks were gonna say chitlins or chitlins. I call it chitlins. Some folks say chitterlings. I like to call it chitlins. Um, let me see. Somebody said maybe I haven't had good mac and cheese yet. I've had it. I just don't like cheese. And I'm one of those weird people that doesn't like cheese but will still eat stuff with cheese in it. Like I'll eat pizza any day, like it's nothing. Especially if it's a loaded pizza, because I like mine with everything on it. Like I needed to have, like the pepperoni and the sausage and the olives and the onions and the mushrooms and the peppers, and I want everything. Like I want the pizza loaded. Like it needs to have the stuff falling off of it. Like, but yeah, I'm hard headed. I don't eat cheese, but I'll eat pizza. Makes no sense. But I won't eat cheese on a burger. I'm not really a nachos person. Any kind of creamy texture cheese, I won't touch. You can't get me to eat nothing with no queso. I don't like any fettuccine, nothing. You can't get me to eat none of that. Like I'm not doing it. And I should have told somebody that one time before I came over, because they made they made the shrimp Alfredo thing. I was like, oops, forgot to tell you, I don't eat that, but this looks real nice. All right, y'all can revoke my black card. I said I don't like the macaroni. D. I'll eat it. It's just not my go-to. But that's because I'm lactose intolerant and I'm in denial about it. I still be trying to eat ice cream too, knowing I'm not supposed to. Okay, let's get into some topics because there's a lot to cover. But these are some great things. Somebody said pumpkin pie. Ooh, I got a story for y'all. We got 1 minute. One time we did like a family. I think it was maybe it was Christmas. I don't know what my mom was going through, but she did the meal one time. She was playing games. Like we have this inside joke, because sometimes if my mom is not feeling something, like I say, if you ever cook for somebody, you have to cook from a place of love. If you have not cooked from love, then the meal ain't gonna be hitting like that. And so I don't know what happened, but the way she rushed this meal that day, but we thought we had sweet potato pie. And mind you, my mom can tear up a sweet potato pie. Like we were so excited. It smelled right. It looked good. And when we bit into it, I'm like, Mama, this don't taste right. You sure this is what you made? And so what happened was, we were, at the time, she was transitioning from from Washington State to Atlanta Metro. So she was staying with a friend while her house was closing and everything. And she only used what the friend had at the house. So the friend didn't have any sweet potatoes. She had canned pumpkin, which I didn't even know was a thing. And so my mom made a pie out of the canned pumpkin. The way everybody was giving her a side eye that day, like, really, you want to wait till people are hungry to experiment and try new things? You could have sent one of us to the store. But she's forgiven. Still love my mother. All right, let's get to the whatchamacallit, because I'll sit here and talk food all day. Okay. So midterms. All right. I'm not gonna spend all day on my soapbox. I will say that I have slept a little better in the last few days, because I just knew America was about to show us who they really are. And they still are, in my opinion. So what I do think is going to happen in the near future, because again, the narrative that was being pushed out there was that GOP was about to take over everything, and not only just take over the House and the Senate, but have like a super majority, like just clean house in these races. And the reason I was so nervous about that was mainly because of just who some of these candidates were that they were going to be putting into power. Like, again, I've said there's been a lot of candidates to run who a lot of times don't have a platform, they have no policy, and they run off extremities and punitive ideas, where more so their idea of governing is just taking things away. So I was a little nervous about how that was all going to go. But, we saw that it didn't really go that way. It was kind of a really balanced result where, I don't really think either side really took over anything. They're kind of just right here, right now. So you have the Dems who have the Senate, and the House has not been called yet. We'll see what happens with that. But I think what the GOP is going to do now is, I think their goal is they're going to put more candidates out there that are a bit more moderate and that can appeal to independent voters or voters that are more so unsure. I think because they had so many candidates that were so extreme, where you literally had like neo-Nazis and stuff running for office, even the people who don't like Democrats were like, all right, this is a stretch here. I don't know if I can get behind this person. And so we'll see how it goes. But I think the other thing to think about is I still feel some kind of way because why were these elections so freaking close? I look at Georgia and I look at Walker versus Warnock, and I just find it so interesting that that election was that close. I said, okay, all right. And I say that because when it comes to Walker, and again, this is not just about what party you choose to align with or what side of the parallel you see yourself on, but it's about just noticing the trend you always see. And clearly, like I've always said, in my opinion, I think Walker is being used as a puppet to be a mouthpiece for white supremacy. That's why they put him out there because they know he'll do whatever they need him to do, and they specifically put him there as a direct reaction to Warnock. Um, Definitely, because in any other situation, Warnock would or Walker would have never been able to even get in the door. Because when you just look at all of the flaws that exist, and again, this is a candidate that once again has no policy, just running off extremities and punitive ideas and talking points and things that make the media talk, but there's no real platform. And so like I said, you often see a lot of people who get elevated when they can operate as a mouthpiece for white supremacy. This is why I was never crazy over Don Lemon from CNN, because I remember the old Don Lemon, especially during Ferguson, and how if it were up to Don, he would throw all of us up under the bus, and everybody would have went to jail. So look at how he was able to climb at CNN. Like that's how he was able to get his whatever he got. Now it's interesting because then I guess he did the trip across the water back home, and I guess that was his wake-up call. And then he came back, and all of a sudden it was for the people. And it's interesting because you see how CNN has kind of just tossed him aside now. They got rid of his late night show. I think they moved him to the morning. I don't know how long that show's going to be around, but it's interesting. When you stop playing the game that they've made for you, automatically you're of no use. That's why we haven't seen Diamond and Silk in a while. Now that Trump, I still think carries a lot of influence, but because that Trump wall has gotten a little shorter. And the movement has become a little bit more scattered. You're not seeing Diamond and Silk on all the major press outlets anymore, right? They're on YouTube over here in the YouTube world trying to stay relevant. Or even like with even Candace Owens, like you're seeing all these people who are literally used to, again, in my opinion, uphold the status quo, maintain that status quo of like white nationalism, ensuring that whiteness continues to be the standard. You're seeing the people who are used, once they are of no use, they get tossed out. And I can guarantee you right now, if Walker loses, y'all will never hear from him again. That will be it. They will find somebody else. Like I said, he was only put there as a direct response to Warnock. And this is where I look at like white evangelicals very interesting and kind of give a side eye. And I say that because, they will latch onto this idea of being so Christian and religious and spiritual, and you literally have a pastor that's running and has a pretty decent image. You haven't really heard any scandals around him, and he comes off as a likable person. All that, you would think that people would get behind him in comparison to who he's running against. But it goes back to what I've always said: for a lot of white evangelicals, their God is whiteness and the benefits that come with it. It's and the reason why so many are so passionate and vote and respond the way they do is they want to maintain that status quo, because the way that things are set up, they get to operate as the standard. They get to operate as the heart of America. When some of these candidates say things like real Americans, and that's who they're talking to. They ain't talking to me. I'm not seen as a real American. I'm seen as somebody that's in the way. I should just be grateful that I'm here and I should shut up. That's kind of what I'm seen as. But like I said, that a lot of them, their God is whiteness. And that's why it's interesting that there's supposed to be kind of a separation of church and state, especially with the churches. Churches, because they are nonprofits, are not supposed to engage in any political anything. But it's interesting where you've seen so many, white evangelical churches breaking their necks to get behind a lot of these candidates that I say, again, are some of the lowest of low. It's not even about what party they're in, but when you see what it is that they represent, this election to me was a conversation about power, not about the people. And every election is that, to be honest. But this election was all about power. And a lot of people in the GOP felt that, okay, they assumed that this is the way America was operating because Trump was so popular. And because, you started getting candidates like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and all of them start to get, a bigger audience. And so they said, we're gonna put more candidates like that out there. And then you saw a lot of white evangelical churches get behind those candidates, no matter how terrible the things these candidates wanted to do were, whether it was cutting Social Security, whether it was more cuts to education, whether it was more cuts to programs for those who are unhoused, whether it was more cuts for people that are in need, whether it was more cuts to Medicare, like all these different things. And it was interesting that that's the candidate they would get behind, and not only get behind, but spiritually get behind, where you have whole prayer circles as some of these people are possibly losing. People having whole prayer circles. I'll never forget 2020. The one pastor he had a TV show. He was up there crying because at that point I think it was already decided he was going to be president. And the man was up there just boo-hooing about this. I'm like, I'll never be that 100% behind any candidate, but there's not a candidate that I'm about to be crying and losing sleep over because they didn't win. Because at the end of the day, I recognize that all these candidates are bought out anyway. They are all in servitude to whatever lobbyists put money in their pocket, to whatever corporations are writing the checks, to whoever, where the money is, follow the money. And so because I saw so many churches, and it's not even just this midterm, but it's the 2020 election, it's 2016, it's even 2018 midterms, because I saw so many like white evangelical churches so passionate to get behind some of these candidates when everything that they represent would go against what it is that they teach spiritually and religiously. And it's so funny because those same candidates who have all those same flaws, when they're on the face of somebody else, all of a sudden those people are a problem. And then even when it comes to people's voting patterns, they vote to make sure certain groups of people, can never come into that same space. Because again, I think when you're in a position to feel that you are the standard of operation, you are the status quo, you get to benefit from it, even if you're not wealthy. The thing I've always said, especially for a lot of people in the white collective that are anti-black, that, don't really care for anybody other than themselves. The one thing that many of them can always say, even if they don't have a pot to piss in, is that, hey, at least I'm not black. At least I'm not whatever this is. At least I still have this to protect me. And I think that's what you saw in a lot of these elections. When you look at Georgia, I'm like 72% of white women voted against Stacey. I said, interesting. And I hate to say it because I said this on 2 lives ago. I said I didn't want to put it out there, but I told you, I was like, I don't see Stacey winning Georgia. I just didn't see it. And I know people are going to have their viewpoints about whatever policy she had. And I gave my reasonings. My reasonings was that because Georgia did not technically really shut down during COVID, Georgia's economy wasn't really hit as hard from COVID. Georgia was able to have a surplus. Brian Kemp was writing checks and giving checks to folks. That was more than enough for some folks to be locked in and be happy and good to go. One thing I will say, I didn't like that there were so many who were, kind of jumping on this is black men's fault that she didn't win. I think we're in a space now where everyone is so locked in and okay with the fact that we know what white America is going to do every time, that black people have to bear the burden of carrying this country. And so even with black men still voting for Stacey at a rate of I think it was 82% or 86 or something like that, the second highest out of all the voter electorate demographics, that y'all still go in and fry them up. I do think there are some in the collective that have some very male chauvinist and misogynistic viewpoints and everything like that. But at the end of the day, 80+% is still way higher than anybody else in any other demographic, especially when you had demographics that were less than 20 and 30. And so I just found it interesting. Black people I think in Atlanta or in Georgia, black folks are 28% of the electorate. So it's like, to put the burden on black people to keep carrying all these elections, I felt some kind of way about. But it's just interesting. And so I don't know, white evangelicals, I need some questions answered. It's the same thing I said when Trump first got elected, and I said I never want to hear another conversation about feminism again because white women showed us where they stand. It's like, yeah, I think again, when it comes to women's rights, black women, I'm sorry, y'all don't have any allies. Y'all are on your own, unfortunately. I think you have allies within the collective, but when we're talking about different groups of people, different races, anti-blackness is everywhere. And so unfortunately, I don't see feminism as an entity that is inclusive to all women. It's inclusive to all women who support the idea of white women serving as a status quo and getting the benefits first, and then everybody else can get what trickles downward later on. But it's just crazy because going back to Warnock and Walker, the thing I find interesting is, like, we know that as a black candidate, to even get in the door, your resume has to be so high, right? The standard has to be so high of what it is that you can do, unless, again, you're operating as a mouthpiece for white supremacy. If you're being used as a political pawn or a puppet, then they can just go and grab anybody, which I just find so interesting. So even like the Obama years, no matter where you stood with Obama, when you're talking about the credentials, the accolades, he was the candidate that had all of these different things that most average people don't. But they wanted so hard to paint this man to just be an idiot and unqualified, and somehow McCain was more qualified than him. Somehow Romney was more qualified. And really, when you want to get to it, the qualifying factor would have just been whiteness. Even though if we want to really, really go there, I think Barack Obama, I never saw him as the black liberation president ever, but that still wasn't good enough. He was somebody I think that tried to bring America together, where everybody had a voice to some extent, And there were some groups I felt that were left out on occasion, but even that wasn't good enough for white America. He still wasn't qualified enough. So yeah, they're going to get behind whatever crazy candidates are out there. But it's just interesting. So with Warnock and Walker, like I've always said with elections, it still ain't the time to tap out. Like I think if there's any hope that I guess on the Democratic side that they get anything done, they're going to need Warnock to win. Because a 50-50 is going to be the same nonsense we just had to sit through for the last 2 years. And like I've always said, I'm not registered with either party. I still like the idea of using a third party to gain leverage out of one of the major two. I don't think a third party candidate will ever win a major election, but I do think a third party or a movement, if there's enough representation and they can be, and I mean, usually that third party would have to be a group that pulls away from one of the major two parties. If they have enough representation where they can make a dent or an effect into what happens within an election, they can use that as leverage to get what they want out of the major two parties. That's how I've always seen things for like at least since 2016, 2018. But this election, like we've always said, it is what it is, a bunch of chaos and nonsense. What else was I gonna say? And I think even when we talk about what happens in the collective, going back to somebody like a Walker, or even like the lieutenant governor of Virginia that was elected in 2020, some of these other folks, I think some of the most dangerous people in politics are the people who want access to proximity to whiteness, right? Who want proximity to power. Because people who are in that space where it's not about the people, it's not about what folks want. When you just want power, you will do any and everything to get it. You will align with anybody. You will be, it doesn't matter what kind of stance you have. If it opens the door to get further in, they will jump in it. And I think we're seeing that with a lot of candidates. It's not even just in a conversation of Black candidates that tend to run on very anti-Black platforms, but it's some of these other candidates that we're seeing come in here. And I think that's why you've seen so many very extreme candidates, in office or at least run, where their ideas aren't even about what the people want. You never hear them talk about what the schools need. You never hear them talk about how we can fix healthcare, how we can fix all these different things. It's always a narrative about some war we're in against ourselves, as far as, we're, everybody's out to get us and we got to go and take down the left. We got to take down the right. We got like a bunch of weird stuff. And you get these candidates where politics for a lot of them is a joke, because either way, they're going to be all right, especially if they're white. Like, it doesn't matter who's in office. White folks going to always be all right. Everybody else is the group that's going to be, collateral. What else is I going to say? And you're even seeing, even when I talk about those extremities again, like you have people already who are not conceding, who have lost, who are not budging. I see the guy in Washington State who's like, I ain't budging. I am not losing this election. And it makes me think, because people thought this was something new, like as far as candidates losing and not backing down. Oh, no, this is embedded in America's history. Like, real quick, because I was reading about a governor out of North Dakota back in the day. Let me read some of this article really quick. The governor, William Wild Bill Langer, had declared martial law and was using the National Guard in effect, National Guard to, in effect, rule North Dakota by force. Langer barricaded himself in his office at the Capitol building after the state Supreme Court upheld a decision that would remove him from office. Because look, he had already lost the election, and he said, "Don't matter, I'm still in here." So it went to the courts. The courts are like, "Nah, you got to get out." All right. He simply refused to leave. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Governor Olson declared himself governor as a result of the ruling and was ordering the National Guard to rescind Langer's declaration. It was arguably one of the most dramatic moments in the state's history, and a fateful one for Sarles. Now, Sarles was the Attorney General in the state. The headlines that played out on that day's forum front page are nothing short of extraordinary. Headline said, "Ousted Governor defies court and fight for office." Another article said, "North Dakota Guard goes with Olson. Mob rumors shake Bismarck." Another article, U.S. Army may be requested to take hand by day's end. Another article, "No Civil War for North Dakota." In 1932, as the state's agricultural economy buckled under the weight of the Great Depression, Langer was nominated by the Nonpartisan League, or NPL, for the office of governor. Vowing to stick it to the Minneapolis grain outfits, the railroads, and big banks, Langer was elected and assumed office in 1933. Shortly thereafter, it was discovered that Langer engineered a scheme to funnel money from the state and federal employee paychecks into a bank account controlled by the NPL. And in early 1934, 15 months after taking office, Langer was indicted on charges of conspiracy to violate an act of Congress, a felony. He was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and fined $10,000 before Judge Andrew A. Miller called a longtime political enemy in May 18th. May 18th is always May 18th. May 18th was Mount St. Helens. That was Liberty City riots. It's always something on May 18th. May 18th, 1967 profile of Langer, written for the forum by historian Elon B. Robinson, That didn't do much for Langer's popularity among voters, though. 10 days after his conviction, primary voters went to the polls and handed him a decisive victory. As the campaign season continued, Langer appealed his conviction and assumed he'd keep office. It came to a head in July of 1934 when the state Supreme Court ruled that Langer needed to go and Olson would assume the role. Still, Langer refused to leave office. Crowds took to the street chanting, "We want Langer," Robinson wrote. After the declaration of martial law, much rested on Sarles, recognized as governor, and from whom he had to take orders. Ultimately, Sarles went with Olson, and with the National Guard out of his corner, Langer finally gave up on the governorship. So the only reason he got out was because the National Guard couldn't back him. That incident was not the last of Wild Bill Langer, though. His conviction was later reversed in December of 1935. A federal jury acquitted him and his associates of all charges. In 1936, he was reelected governor. 4 years later, he was elected to the U.S. Senate. All right, so our politics are a mess. You know what I mean? America's always just going to be a mess. And I think one of the reasons why we have so many lunatic candidates that have been running is, like I said on the last live, an example has not been made out of a lot of the people who do a lot of scameration, who do a lot of things that are illegal, who commit crimes, who try to overtake electives and fake electors and try to run for office and become the Secretary of State so they can be over the election and do whatever they want, or try to change the rules with elections where we'll set it where if the mail-in ballots are not counted by the end of election day, they won't be counted, even though we've made a rule that even as mail-in ballots come in, we can't count them until election day. So yeah, sure, we can have 30 people try to count 1,000,000 ballots in a, 5 hours after the polls close. The polls close at 7 p.m. The day is over at midnight. You got 5 hours to count 1,000,000 votes. And if you don't count them all, too bad. Like, that's where our politics is. And so you're just seeing a lot of nonsense. And so, like I said, it's really just not the time to really back out. You even see people saying now, well, let's raise the minimum voting age, to 21. These 18-year-olds, they don't know what they're doing. But for some reason, it's okay to send 18-year-olds to war to go get blown up or to go shoot and kill people they don't know from off the street because our government told them to. Or for some reason, even when it comes to women's reproductive rights, it's okay for a 10-year-old to have to carry a child if they've been assaulted by, in that kind of term, trying to not use certain words so I don't get demonetized. But it's been ruled that 10-year-olds can raise a child, but all of a sudden 18-year-olds are too stupid to vote. These kids know what's up. And so, it's interesting. And I think what we're going to also see now is you're going to start seeing a big shakeup in the media. Because again, like I said on the last live, media operates in regards to ratings. So whatever they think the people want to hear is where they're going to go. So for the last, 6 years, everything has been very to the right? Well, we've criminalized everything. There's been a whole narrative of good guys versus bad guys, conversations about crime, even though crime in America is still at one of its lowest points since the 1980s, 1990s. There's all these different talking points that are out there. They latch onto the vulnerabilities of viewers. They latch onto the things that scare people. They latch onto the things that people are passionate about, and they will exploit it for ratings. And it's not even just, and a perfect example is like even the sugar industry. Like one of the things that happened was a lot of major sugar corporations and companies, they paid politicians and scientists and agencies to lie about the harmful effects of too much sugar. And so that's why when we got into the late 80s, going into the 90s, the big conversation was, the thing you need to stay away from is fats. Fat this. The fats are what are making us sick. And that's why we saw the movement of like fat-free ranch, fat-free this, fat-free cheesecake, fat-free water, if that was the thing, right? And in reality, there was no conversation about sugar and what it was doing to folks. And so, load up on all the sugar you want, but hey, thank God it's fat-free. And so the sugar industry was in a space where they could rack up so much money. And then even the makeup of what was in our food, things were deregulated. Things were put into play where corporations and a lot of these food corporations and agencies now are in a space where they can do a little bit more to our food. You know what I mean? All because at that point, the collective stance was fat-free. Fats are bad. And then we learned that, no, actually, there are good fats. And a lot of the reasons why we have so many problems now is because people aren't getting enough, fats in their diet. And people also were running away from the carbs and running away from this. And so I'm just going to only eat meat and, whatever it depended on. So, and the same thing, we talked about milk before, I think a few lives ago, the whole Got Milk movement and the idea to paint a picture of milk being a standard of what humans needed to consume in order to be healthy, when in reality, especially when you're talking about milk that's like not pasteurized or milk that's, as far as full, like not 1%, not 2%, but all of the things that are in there that are not good for us, as far as the pus that comes out of the cows and all the different things that have led to other health complications for a lot of people. Because again, we're not cows, and again, look at how huge cows are. So like, in my opinion, drinking milk is like drinking steroids all day. And I think this is why you've just seen like body types in America shift over the last 30 years. The consumption of so much sugar and again, all the milk that we put with children. Because even like when I was still running a community center and you would have the free meal programs and stuff, the absolute must that had to be included with every meal was milk. You had to have milk as a complete meal. So if we went to a food bank and it's like, okay, what composes a technical snack for this program is, some kind of fruit, some kind of grain, and you have to have a milk. So it's either a fruit or vegetable, some kind of grain, and milk is included. Even when the kids would get the snack, if they didn't want the milk, they still had to at least take the milk so that you could write it down in the check mark and send it to the food bank, and they could document that, hey, yes, we sold this milk or we utilize this milk. So understand, like, all of this stuff comes full circle. Everything is interconnected. That's why I always say follow the money, because it answers so many questions. The reason why it's so hard for me to get behind a lot of candidates is because I know so many are bought out. And I just see what is pumped into our elections. And I've said this as long as I've had a channel. Until money is taken out of politics, American politics is always going to be, I want the cuss, an S word show. You know what I mean? We're never going to get candidates that can really do or really see the will of the people, because at this point, our politics is big corporations versus big corporations, and who's going to be the face of those corporations to give people the assumption that they're representing the people. That's where we're at right now. And I do think there are some good people who try to run and try to do well, but when you're going against a machine that's already locked in and matriculating, it is really hard to go against the grain, because they're going to make sure you don't win. That's why you have something like an RNC or a DNC, because they're going to pump money into the candidate that they want. So any candidate who goes against the grain, it's going to be extremely hard to really break that door down unless you have some big kind of money. And the average person doesn't. I'm going to pause because I said a lot. Let me read a few comments. Okay. Oh, we said a lot. Thank you, Ebony V. Honestly, do you ever see us coming together as a collective? The systematic oppressions may have won when it comes to keeping us divided. The challenge I've always said, specifically for Black Americans, is we are the only collective that has to, unfortunately, operate under a collective umbrella. And that's because we live under a system of anti-Blackness. And so no matter where we stand on things, even politically, because I've said Black people are not a monolith. You have Black people that are conservatives. I think you have a lot more Black people that were conservative if the Conservative Party wasn't so racist. And if the GOP wasn't so racist, there would be a lot more Black people that were Republican. My voice is always going out. To be fair, I just did an hour on another show. But and so because of that, we're always going to be under a system that's working against us. And so even whether or not we want to, I think the faster we recognize that there are powers that be that try to keep us divided or keep us where we are. And, we've done a million conversations of everything in the past that has happened and how it affects us today. It is so hard to get everybody to be on the same page, because we're now in a space where society is very individualistic. And that's not even just for Black folks, that's society in general. But I do think there was a point in time where Black people collectively operated a bit more as a unit, because folks understood what we were up against. Things that were once collectively understood are now up in the air again, like I said on the last live. And so sadly, I don't think you can ever get 40 million people to all see things the same way, because technically it's not fair, but unfortunately we live in a system that's not fair. So we're forced to try. And I think because as a collective, we've never known liberation. We've never really known freedom. Yeah, it's on paper, but we see how we're living. We see what society does. Nobody has a real answer to how to fix everything. And in addition to that, even if you wanted to really fix a lot of the major problems, you still need money. And then that's where the generational wealth gap comes into play. And then that's where the conversation of allies comes into play, because now you need people who are in positions of power to help. But unfortunately, anti-Blackness is everywhere, and you don't even know who to trust, because there's politicians that will pander and latch in. And this is why, even for a lot of Black candidates that run, a lot of them don't really have platforms that are for Black people. And when I say for Black people, understand, because I think some people are thinking that a lot of us just want a candidate that's going to run and they're only going to take care of Black folks and the hell with everybody else. I think people are asking for a candidate that will go ahead and make sure that America is good, but not forget about the promises that they've made to Black voters. Because again, Black voters get taken advantage of in every election, every single time. We constantly have to save this country from its nonsense just to still be treated as second-class citizens. And the dangerous part about all that is, if we chose to sit out and just let things go under, we're going to be the first as collateral, because when white America is not doing good, Black people suffer even more. So when you talk about what happened in the Great Depression, some of those who were the hardest hit were Black folks, even though they never got the luxury to participate in anything. And so that's where we always run into different issues. And when you talk about the financial recession of 2007, 2008, that was a spearheading like bullet train into gentrification for a lot of cities, when so many Black people had to go into foreclosure. And when you tie the origins of where that even started, you talk about something like Countrywide, where they had predatory loans and predatory lending systems, where they told folks, yeah, you guys can afford this house at this interest rate. Yeah, we'll lock you in and everything else like that. And then here comes the interest rates ballooning and all these different things, and people couldn't afford to stay where they're at, and they get pushed out, they get foreclosed. Somebody comes in and buys it at a really cheap price. Developers come in and then they build it all up and turn it into something else. That's the same thing I said about the opportunity zones from the last administration, where technically the opportunity zones were really just a way to speed up the gentrification process. Because again, the opportunity zones pretty much, they gave tax breaks to developers that would go into the areas that needed opportunity, pretty much every black part of town, right? But the problem with the policy was that in order to get the tax break, you already had to be an established business or corporation, right? That means any mom and pop, black owned paint store that somebody's trying to start up, black owned, well, usually the salons are already there. We always gonna have a salon game on lock or a barbershop, but as far as like, I don't know, I want to start a black owned music studio company. Like, you weren't eligible for those tax breaks. And then the other problem was there was no line items in the bill or in that policy that stated that if you came into these areas, you had to ensure that the people in that area were included with the development, meaning jobs would be available, meaning that resources would be available. You wouldn't come in here and just take up all the electricity and the water out the area, and everybody else's bill has to go up because you're consuming so much. So now the company wants to raise the rates in that entire area. Like, none of those things were in the policy. And what it did was, a lot of folks came in and they just built things in hospitality. So like the majority of the properties and the businesses that opened in these opportunity zones were all in hospitality. So big giant hotels, big giant things that really don't do much to include or incorporate the people. That's one of the reasons why, like, even you see this all the time with a lot of businesses that want to do development, and they always promise something and never deliver. So even like with MGM, because y'all tried it too over there in Maryland, where they built that big old MGM casino over in Oxon Hill, right? And they had promised, when we build this casino, we're going to give so much to the PG County schools. Now, that casino has been open since, I want to say like 20, it's been open for a few years. They have no money going to the schools. And so, this is where we're at. So when I say that collectively, we are not a monolith, but unfortunately we have to operate as one. Like, that's where I'm coming from, where everything operates full circle. So we're always in a space where we're on the receiving end of nonsense, where we always have to have our defense. Like I said on the last live, I think black people vote from a position of being on the defense. We never get the luxury to be on the offense, which is why it's so hard to get candidates you want, because we're spending so much time trying to stop the lunatic candidates from taking away the little bit we already got, or whatever. So we can't even ever ask for anything else or demand anything else, because we got to combat some lunatic that decides, I want to pull more funding out of the school. I want to close these county hospitals. I want to do this. So you got to spend all your time finding candidates that will protect those entities, and then also try to give you the things that you're asking for. Like, we want more investment into, this neighborhood because of this. We want more green space. We want cleaner water. We want better pipes. We want tuition to go down, like all these different things. But it's so hard to find that in a candidate, because like I said, by the time they get to that national stage, by the time they get to that major platform, they're bought out. So many lobbyists and companies are already in their pocket. They've already made a promise to this corporation to do this, a promise to this corporation to do that. That's why none of these politicians go against big oil, because big oil's in everybody's pocket on both sides. All right. This is why, like BP, after that oil spill, there's no reason why they should have even been in business at that point. And it's not even just BP, because like little Shell, like so many of these corporations have done so many things that are terrible for the environment. And even when you talk about Shell, I always tell people don't shop at Shell, because hell, Shell was one of the backing supporters of apartheid in South Africa. But everything is, like I said, full circle. That was a really long response. My bad. I didn't mean to get on my soapbox, but yeah, crazy. All right. Chi said, no one expects a 10-year-old to raise a child. And I agree. And I don't think it's fair if somebody is the victim of something that they had no control over, because again, they were assaulted, and then you punish them and make them go through the brutal experience of childbirth at 10. Childbirth is already a lot for grown adults. So imagine a 10-year-old with the kind of body that they have trying to push out a whole baby. Like, what kind of, ooh. All right. All right, let's see. Janet Bennett said, yep, too much sugar is too inflammatory for our body. Exactly. Eating corn as well. Yeah, at this point, corn is such a GMO now. It's not, there's no nutrients in it. Oh, thank you, Queen. The 1619 Project has a very informative segment / chapter on sugar and its relation to Black people. Like I said, this even goes back, and I'm gonna get to that conversation later on, but even when we're talking about the suppressing of information, you've seen that movement in the last few years. Because I think as America is slowly waking up and recognizing things aren't right, because you're seeing all kind of groups start to ask questions. It's not just black folks saying something doesn't add up. All these different groups have questions about a lot of things. You're seeing that effort to suppress information, education. I think it's one of the reasons why Elon Musk was so pressed to buy Twitter. I'll get to him too. But yeah, let's see. Yeah, this change of weather is messing me up because it was literally like 70 degrees 2 days ago. Today was like 45. Like, man, I had my humidifier in the back earlier because this air in my apartment is always really, really dry. I should have kept it on and plugged it in, but oh well. Um, Janine Grant said oil and pharma are untouchable, and they are. And I also think the military-industrial complex is untouchable. So military, oil, and big pharma; those are three of the major, and insurance companies are the four major things that pretty much run this country. Um, Black Queen said, Calvin, please run for office. You will stay true to yourself and your people. The one thing I literally just said on the other show I was at, because like I said, I have no interest in being in politics. Like I would like to live a long life. You know, I don't want the stress of it. But I've always said if I ever did consider running for anything, it would be for a school board. I'll get to that in a second later too. My sinuses are killing me today. Yep. Jim Dropper, just like the attack on black women's hair, and the solution from them was relaxers, and they have caused us to be overweight, thyroid issues, cancer, and a plethora of other problems. Also fibroids. Yeah, like there's so much you're up against. That's why I really hope that people get into a space where they're constantly inquiring things. Even if you're not sure about something, ask questions. And if you don't think you got the answer that makes sense, go to somebody. Like constantly dig and just I think the more we learn collectively, the more we understand how to operate and move as a unit, but also move as a unit where people can still have their respective experiences, where we don't have to all share the same everything as far as how we see the world, how we do things, because everybody does have their own way of wanting to do things. But I think we have to get into a space where information is not a bad thing. I always say the minute you choose to stop learning, you're stuck. It's kind of like a race. Like everybody's running. The minute you choose to stop learning or inquiring, you stop wherever you're at on the track. Everybody else is still going, right? And so before you know it, you're still in that same place. They've had a million other races. Other people have come and surpassed and surpassed and surpassed. They decided there's a new budget. They're going to build a whole new track and field spot. You still in that same spot. Now they got to bulldoze and move you over somewhere else while they build a new track right on top of you. And now you're locked in to a space that you can't climb out of because you're under the new track because you never took the time to evolve. You know what I mean? All right. I did want to talk a little bit about Takeoff. I didn't get a chance to when everything happened. I will say that was horrible, wasn't it? Really sad. I just think we are literally in this space where a lot of things that should have no business happening are happening. Like I think the most frustrating aspect, I'll get back to the actual incident, but what frustrated me the most was the fact that this man had been shot, and the first thing so many people wanted to do was record and be the first to post the video, be the first to have the exclusive scoop, be the first to go viral, be the first to have everybody trafficking to whatever social media platform they have because they're the ones with the exclusive video. And I think the challenge is imagine what that's like, because again, his family found this out via social media, just like the rest of the world, right? Imagine you're minding your business. You just talk to whoever. All right, I'll see you later. And I don't know, you're in line at the grocery store. You just happen to check your phone, and there's a video of your relative dead on the floor, right? I don't think people realize that we've gotten into such a space where clout is everything. The access to fame, the access to everybody giving you validation has become such an urge that people want to have that it comes into a dangerous territory. Because even with the funeral, the fact that the family said they didn't want to record it, they didn't want it live streamed, that's why it was a private affair, and people still went there and recorded. And you have folks who are in there just, crying their hearts out, being as vulnerable as possible. This is because this is their friend, this is their relative, this is who they grew up with, so on and so forth. And they don't even get that privacy. It would be like if when my father died, I live streamed the funeral so y'all could see how my whole family reacted. Like that's kind of the same kind of nonsense. So I just, Yeah, and then the other thing, then you get the people who jump into the conspiracies and oh, it's a this and a that. And I'm like, here y'all go. Y'all can't even let the man rest in peace. We always got a conspiracy. I'll never forget the time that lady was on here trying to tell me Aretha Franklin was a sacrifice. I was like, she was 76. Who was she sacrificed for? Because I ain't seen no Aretha Franklin replacement yet. I'm like, the woman was sick, unfortunately, and unfortunately, she passed. Everything is not always a conspiracy. I think people have watched so many movies. You know, they're into so much sci-fi and fiction, and I'm not gonna lie. There's a whole lot of nonsense that happens in the world, but everything is not always a conspiracy. I think with Takeoff situation, it was a conversation of ego and pride, and I think people have to recognize no ego is worth somebody's life. What happened should have never happened. Um, I think one of the other things I saw people start saying, because then comes the conversation about rap music, right? Um, One of the things that annoyed me as I kind of said some of my 2 cents on social media, people came to me, it was like, oh, but you sit there, you support all them rappers who talk about shooting and killing and blah, 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 blah. Y'all have never heard me come on here and gas up any entertainer that does anything that is detrimental to the collective. I have never had a problem calling people out. But I will say, in regards to the conversation of hip hop, yes, there is a problem with a lot of these entertainers that put out content that I feel is detrimental, but they are the end result of the business. The smoke is for the music industry. The smoke is for the outlets that choose to distribute this kind of content. The smoke is for the labels that tell artists that actually do make great content or things that are community building, and they say, this isn't what the people want. We need you to do something else, which is why we have all these entertainers that have street cred, that are from the suburbs, that have college degrees, that are married with 2 and 3 kids, that have never grown up in certain neighborhoods that they rap about, and that would never go back to certain neighborhoods that they rap about. But there's an image that's there. And I think the other issue that I've run into with that specific conversation is it's so multi-layered. But anytime something goes down, the first reaction is that black people are just we're just too stupid to be able to decipher reality from the fake. I think most people realize what a lot of these rappers and entertainers do is not their real lives. People, I think, just choose to consume what they consume. It's not really for me. I'm an R&B head. I like melody, okay? I want to sing along. So there's not a lot of rappers I really listen to. But if you want to have the smoke for, music that, again, is detrimental in regards to always rapping or singing about killing everybody or how women are B-words and thoughts in this and things that are misogynistic or things that glorify drug trafficking and drug life and all that stuff like that, then you need to bring the smoke to the record labels. And also understand that some of these rappers that are rapping about these experiences, some of that is actually coming from a genuine place where that is their experience. And that's been their outlet to show the world what it's like in their neighborhood. Unfortunately, I think that has been exploited once people realized there was money to be made. And I think once the music industry was no longer regional, and we had these major corporations like iHeart or some of these, like even the record labels at this point, there's only a handful of major record labels. You know what I mean? Like back in the day, there were so many record labels where they could really just focus on developing an artist, making sure that artist puts out quality music. We're now in a space where there's only a handful of really major labels, and the music industry already sucks because nobody's making any money. So labels are going to do anything and everything in their power to get the biggest dime that they can get. And right now, it's still shock factor. And so they're never going to really push artists that are talented, in my opinion. There's a handful that are the exception. There's a handful that get to slip through the cracks. But right now, we're also in a space now where with social media and TikTok and things like that, labels are operating by what the public collectively moves with. And collectively, society moves with chaos, which is why the most popular reality shows are the ones where everybody's throwing hands. You look at anything on Zeus Network, and I know I talk my trash because I admitted that I did watch the Jocelyn Hernandez show because I ain't gonna lie, that was entertaining, but I don't endorse it. But recognize that, like, even with everything on Zeus, it don't matter what show it is, as soon as the cameras turn on, everybody throwing hands, everybody fighting, like there's not even a storyline. They just come in fighting, don't even know nobody, kicking somebody in the face. Like that's what people tend to latch on to. And I think the music industry recognized that. So there's certain images that they're going to put out. So right now, as an entertainer, your best ways into the industry, if you're a rapper as a male, is again, the whole street cred, shoot them up, kill them up, let's cut the cocaine in the kitchen and bake it up kind of energy. And if you're a woman in the industry, you're going to have to be hypersexualized, unfortunately. So an artist like Rhapsody will never get that major push. Doechii, I don't think will ever get that kind of major push, but they're going to constantly push artists that they think are the move. So the music industry is not about talent. It's not about music. It's all about what's going to bring in the biggest buck. And that's where they move. And so when everybody started going in on black folks and saying black folks are the reason why Takeoff died, I think it's a multi-layered conversation. I think multiple things can be true at once, but I think if we really want to go after rap, then you got to go after the industry. Because honestly, all the other music is just as violent. Country music is not a wholesome genre. All right, listen to all them songs and country artists came out with after 9/11. We'll strap a bomb and you'll know never to fuck with America again. So I don't want to hear it. Um, but no, I do think people have to heal themselves too collectively. There's a lot of hurt people moving in society, and hurt people hurt people. Like I said, there's no reason why what happened to Takeoff should have happened. Period. It makes no sense to me. Absolutely. And the fact that it could happen in a public place, it wasn't even like y'all were in a back alley. Y'all had a bowling alley. Like, make it make sense. Okay. Let me pause for a second. But no, that was really terrible. I hated that that went down. And even with Quavo situation, because then you saw a lot of people really light up Quavo, like, had you calm down, this is what happened, something, something, something. I think he's aware that maybe things could have been handled differently. But at this point, that man unfortunately has guilt over him for the rest of his life. I think he knows that, yeah, maybe things should have taken place differently. Like that's already tough enough. Like I said, I think people are hurt. And I think people are saying like Takeoff wasn't even supposed to be there that day. And that's crazy. That was really sad. And we've seen so many. You've noticed there's been an influx of a lot of rappers be violently killed. Like when I think back to being a kid, the main two rappers that we saw pass from violence were Biggie and Tupac. Like Eazy-E died from HIV. MC Trouble died because she had an epileptic seizure, if you knew who she was. But Biggie and Tupac were the main two. And when that happened, so many were like, we got to really change things. We got to come together. Because even that was still the era where rappers still used to get together and make, community type songs. So remember, like all the rappers from Oakland had, I forgot the name of the song, but this is like before Biggie and Tupac died. This is earlier 90s. But it was a song, I think they were based out of Oakland, but it had like NWA on there. I think 357 was on there. I think Hammer might have been on there. All of them, like you had stuff like that. You had Self Destruction from a few years earlier. You had Freedom with all the women rappers. It had like Left Eye and Salt and Pepper and Patra and all these different folks. Like there had always been that movement of like a collective energy to let's try to do better. One thing I always loved on YouTube, there's a performance. Remember the group Black Men United? It was like a super group, kind of like a We Are the World, but for R&B with black artists in the 90s. And it had like Tevin Campbell, Usher, Gerald Levert, After Seven, Brian McKnight. I think R. Kelly was on there, all these different male entertainers. And it was interesting because I think they were performing it at the AMAs, right? So it's all these black men up here singing a song about community and stuff. One of the things I always loved is that there's a camera where it pans to Salt and Pepper. Salt and Pepper, they were the only ones up, but like Salt and Pepper was up and like supporting, like, we feel like, I just feel like the 90s, it still had its flaws. Nothing was perfect. There was still a lot of folks that were doing a lot of nonsense, but I feel like there was a better sense of community and a collective. And I think that also goes back to the fact that the music industry was still a bit more regional. Everybody was from certain neighborhoods. Like when you look at a lot of the entertainers from the 90s, especially in hip hop or even the 80s, everybody was connected to something. So like going back to Salt and Pepper, the fact that, they worked at J.C. Penney or Sears. And in that same space, Kid and Play had worked there. Martin Lawrence had worked there. Like all these different people had connections and brought people up. And so you have these different cohorts of groups that, existed in certain spaces. So I think as all of them made it up, everything was kind of like a big family. Yeah, you had your beefs, you had your drama, but the idea was still ensuring that community was first. So even in our sitcoms, everybody had on HBCU hoodies and sweatshirts all the time. You know what I mean? That you had the Million Man March. You had the the Million Woman March a few years later. Like you had all these different things. I don't think we're in that space anymore. And it goes back to the fact that I think society has just become so individualistic, even within our collective. And so it's all about me and how I can secure the bag and, F all the haters. And even think about people when they go on Instagram and they post a picture, and they're trying to find a caption, the caption, they go be digging through somebody's lyrics to go find something to stir the pot with. Like that's where we're at. I'm not gonna lie, I looked at Drake sideways with the Meg Thee Stallion line. My thing is this. I don't understand the purpose of why you jumped into that conversation. It's already a toxic enough conversation to have. But the fact that you felt for some reason you needed to jump into that and stir that up even more, for clout, so people could talk about it. Like that's where we're at right now. So I don't sense a community with a lot of those who are in a space of being celebrity. Like that's why I don't really get behind too many. I'll support music and go to concerts and stuff, but I don't see any of them as saviors to our politics or to community. Because once you just get into a certain space, especially in regards to wealth, that idea of community is done for some folks. I think there are some who try. Like I saw Lil Baby. I saw what he did with the barber, how he gave her all that money just as a gift because she took care of his entire entourage. Like stuff like that is dope. But you don't have enough people like that around, unfortunately. Okay, let's keep it going. I feel like I'm preaching today. We're not even talking about that. We'll get there. My bad, y'all. Kira said, yeah, people are mental for recording him pass away. There's just certain things I don't want to see. You know, I remember this one time, it kind of scared me, to be honest. I was at work, I was on my little lunch break. And so I just parked because I was going to pick up food. And I heard this loud crash. Like it sounded like if you were to take like, dang man, I don't know, like a big pumpkin and just slam it in the sidewalk. That's what it sounded. But you just heard like a hard sound and then a soft sound, right? It was almost like cracking an egg, right? And so I heard a scream, and then when I looked over, it was this family, right? It was this just like I guess it was the daughter and maybe her husband and their dad. Like their dad was an older man, probably in his late 70s, early 80s. He had fell, and when he fell, he hit his head on the concrete, and his head had like cracked. Um, and so as I'm hearing the woman like scream and panic, and they're trying to call 911, and the poor woman didn't even know where she was, because the area that I was at is kind of like it was up like Route 1. It's kind of like an area you just stop at if you need to grab food and keep going if you're trying to get to the freeway. So she was trying to get 911 to understand where she was at. She was trying to describe the area she was. So I ended up kind of telling them, okay, this is the street we're on, blah 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 blah. I did have a defibrillator in my trunk. But long story short, I could have been somebody that was like, "Oh, let me record. It's an old man, this old white man on here dying." Like, well, recorded it. But like, I think we're in a space now where for some people they would have recorded like, "Oh, he hit the dirt." I don't know, and like just to record that family's reaction. And it was just scary because I just remember like the blood on the sidewalk is something I'll never forget, and it's not there anymore. But even the stain was there for weeks. I don't know if that man made it or not. But stuff like that, I just don't get how people can be in a space to want to record certain things. You know what I mean? It's kind of like even when there'd be like the neighborhood fights, and it's the whole family out there fighting another family. They got the little toddler out there standing, she's crying because mama's getting beat up, and everybody's just recording, and like stuff like that, I'd be feeling some kind of way about. Okay, I have got to get to these other topics because we'll never get through these other 6 pages. So I'm going to keep it going. Thank you all for your comments. I do try to go back and look at the live chat at some point and usually read all the comments. And again, I don't think this is just something that's new to this era, because even when sadly like Aaliyah and Left Eye died, there were people passing their pictures around of their bodies in middle school. I remember that. People go print them out. And that's back when folks didn't even have color printers sometimes. You sit at the cafeteria, oh, y'all want to see it? And it's a black and white picture. I'm like, y'all, you're terrible. Ellen says, I also blame artists for this mess. And I think artists have to stand up more too. I think a lot of artists are compromised. I think a lot of folks have no backbone, even in sports. I've always said these athletes work my nerves because they don't realize the collective power that they have. At the end of the day, you all are the athletes. People pay to see you, not the owners, not all these wealthy people who tell y'all toes to the line and all that other stuff. Like if these athletes could recognize the collective power they have, they could get a lot of things done. They could also be treated a lot more fairly. But again, chasing that dollar, nobody wants to mess up their bag. All right. Okay, I'm gonna move on. This will be quick. I did get an opportunity to see Till. I was gonna do a review about it, but it was a lot. As far as the movie, and again, this is about Emmett Till. The movie was more so about the mother. It wasn't even really centered on Emmett. Hold on, let me grab a different drink. Give me 1 second. My bad. Here we go. Yes. That's what I want. Okay, my bad, folks. Boom. So, okay, what I'm drinking, this is like really, really good. Like if your sinuses are all jacked up, I'm trying to get this in the right. Damn, hold on, the stupid light's blocking. Okay. This is like, it's like a ginger drink, but it's only like lime and ginger. And African ginger at that. But this thing, like, man, it will clear you right up. Okay. So anyway, like I was saying, so the movie more so focuses on the journey of the mom, right? And I will say the thing I did appreciate was that they did not show technically what would have happened to Emmett Till. But I will say it was still a hard watch because what they ended up doing, and I won't really spoil this movie. I don't think none of y'all are going to see it anyway. But what they ended up doing instead was they had like a pan out of the shed that he would have been in, and then you kind of just hear the sound effects. So that was really hard to sit through. But the movie was more so about the mother's struggle, and the mother trying to get justice for her child. And there's just so many things in there that had me stressed out watching that. And because when I saw it at the theater, there was only two people in there. And the only reason I chose to see it because I'm at a space where I'm tired of the trauma porn. Like I'm tired of all of the slave movies and Jim Crow this and every movie we get somebody gotta get beat in the head. But we don't really hear about his mother that often. We always hear the story about how she wanted the open casket. But I feel like the second portion of Emmett Till's story is what the mother had to deal with. That's never included, even with the white lady that lied. We're just now talking about what Carolyn Bryant a few years later. She was never included in the conversation, and so it talks about her experience and even going to the trial and how there were death threats. And there was a scene that if I could have jumped through the screen and beat that little kid up, there's a scene where she's at the press conference before the trial. Mind you, the whole jury is a bunch of middle-aged white men, so you know how they're going to vote for everything. The mother is trying to explain why she's there, and while she's doing that, a gunshot goes off. And what it is, it's like a little kid with a toy gun, this white kid that boom, just to scare everybody, and started laughing. I was like, man, if I had a little brother to send over there to go beat you up. But it's an interesting watch. If you do choose to watch it, I think it does. It helps you to understand what that mother had to deal with and how society treats Black women. Because they tried to paint her to be a harlot. They tried to paint Emmett Till's father to just kind of be somebody who just pretty much dropped it off in the mom. And, the mom was wild and unmarried and all these different things. And they tried to make Emmett, of course, be what he was. I want to go back and see if this is technically true, because I know sometimes these movies, add things. In the movie, at the end, there's a scene where, pretty much the jury's already going to decide, but the judge dismisses the jury and he lets Carolyn Bryant testify. And he's like, it's not going to be included within the verdict, but I just want her to tell her story. So she goes up there and she tells this story about how he had snatched the money out of her hand and held her and flipped her over the counter and grabbed her by the waist and had her arms tied back. I was like, ugh. I'm glad I live in a space where the majority of the people look like me, because God, that was a really hard watch. But I think the second half it makes up for the first half. The first half is pretty much tough to sit through because you know what's going to happen. But the second half, I think, helps to paint the picture. Anyway, shifting gears here, Casey Anthony, and this is going to be real quick because I don't know why they're giving her a platform. So as we see, they have some kind of special, I don't know what it's on. I don't know if it's on ABC or Hulu, and it's on one of them platforms. They are giving Casey Anthony this big, giant interview special. Now, remember, Casey Anthony is the one who I personally feel killed her daughter, tried to hide it, and make up this whole story about the girl being kidnapped, and somehow she got off, right? And for me, even when I read that she was going to be having any kind of special, I'm like, why are y'all interviewing her? She's still going to be up there lying. Because when you just go back to that case, right? The story that the defense tried to put out there was, oh, there was an incident at the pool and Kaylee drowned and she was just so shocked. So her and the dad had this plan where they would just bury her in the back because it would be too much for the mother. And then they buried her in the back and just tried to pretend nothing happened. And then that's where Casey added the extra bits, and she was kidnapped by these two, this Hispanic lady, Zanita Gonzalez. They always gonna find somebody that's not white to blame, right? And all of that. And my thing is, if it were true that the little girl drowned, you would have called 911 because you would have wanted to do everything to save the little girl. The fact that the little girl was found with tape in her mouth, the fact that, they did the Google searches in the woman's computer and found how to find chloroform, things that you put into to help bodies decompose faster and stuff like that. That woman is guilty. I don't even know why they tried to play around with us like that. Going back to the Zanita Gonzalez thing, and the other thing too, Casey was going to little hot body contest, they have the part, who's the hottest chick in the thing, and she, and I'm like, your whole daughter dead, living it up, right? She was happy that girl wasn't there no more. She could finally run the streets again. I think she was one of those people who had a child too young and was mad because she felt like her youth was taken away. That's what I thought. But she had lied about where she worked. She had said that she'd been working at Disney World or Universal Studios. She took the investigators there. Somehow she was able to get into the portion where the staff is, and then she was trying to pretend that her office was somewhere, and then she had to acknowledge that she didn't work there. I'm like, the way y'all let this woman lie. But going back to Zanita Gonzalez, I've said this has always been a pattern, especially for a lot of white women who like to make up things on other groups of people. We saw that with Rosewood, how, again, an accusation of rape, when in reality, the white woman was out there being fast and cheating on her husband. And so she blamed it on the Black guy, and they burned down all of Rosewood, Florida, right? Even if you talk about Tulsa, here we go, another white woman making some claim. Now they go and burn down everything. And one of the trifling things about Tulsa, really quick, I wrote it in one of my notes. I told you I have this obsession where anytime I learn something, I have a whole thing that just says facts. It's like pages and pages. Um, Really quick, one of the things that also sucked about what happened to the people of Tulsa, um, so as the race war, racial attack had ended, the police and the authorities gathered up all of the black residents and put them on the state fairgrounds, right? And then in addition to that, like there were 1,200 homes that were burned down. Like sometimes they've kind of changed the narrative and tried to say, oh, it was just a few people that died. It wasn't that bad. No, that was absolutely horrible. We talked about the turpentine bombs that they used. Like that's the first time a bomb's ever been dropped on U.S. soil. But the people dealt with a lot of nonsense. But going back to my point, you constantly see this pattern of like white women coming into some kind of space and blaming it on somebody black. Susan Smith, remember, she went and drowned her own kids in the lake and said, oh, it was a black man who kidnapped my kids. First of all, nobody wants anybody else's kids. You know what I mean? Like, no, why would somebody want to kidnap somebody's kids? I think it does happen, but you know, her story fell apart. Of course, the person she wants to blame is the black guy, because again, remember, this is the early 90s. This is also at a time where crime in the US was still very high, and the image in the face of crime was black people based on what was pushed in our media, based on what was shown on TV shows like Cops or America's Most Wanted, and we were still in the war on drugs. And so when they would do the news montage and the different clips, every time they talked about drugs or crack, they show black people in the neighborhood not doing drugs, not selling them, not smoking it, but just standing by a fence. And you'd always see that shot of just black folks from the shoulders down, the waist down. And that somehow equated to crime, which is why I think sometimes when people just see black folks standing in a space, they think they're up to something that's no good, right? And then again, when we talk about crack, right? I don't know why they made black people the face of crack users because at the end of the day, the majority of crack users were white. And the funniest thing about it is we talk about the mandatory minimums and everything else like that. What was just so interesting is like not a single crack user that was white was convicted of a federal drug crime in LA. This is why when it comes to these politicians, I'll be looking at them sideways, even the ones that are in power now, Joe. You know, there was so much nonsense that happened where, again, white folks were literally doing things in massive numbers, but you paint black folks to be the face of it. So it brought me back to Bethany Storrell. And the reason I say Bethany Storrell is the reason why I started this channel. If you've been here since the beginning, you knew my YouTube channel initially was me promoting my comedy shows. And when I was still coaching and teaching dance and performing, it was for that. Bethany Storrell was this lady in Vancouver, Washington, right? Vancouver, Washington is this border town that it was a fort town at one point, Washington State, Southern Washington. It kind of borders like the Columbia River between Washington State and Oregon. So there's not a whole lot of black folks there, right? And so Bethany Storrell had claimed that she was attacked by a black woman, and the black woman threw acid on her face. And so when we go around and watch the news, you see her face is peeling, her face is turned green, skin peeling, the oils and the red, all that wild stuff, right? And so she said a black woman had did it. I think what people never thought about is Vancouver. Let me look up the demographics of Vancouver, Washington, in 2010. Vancouver, Washington. Hold on, demographics, race. All right, let's see. Vancouver, Washington is 78% white. Can y'all tell me how many black people are there? I need the number because I need to make a point here. Come on. Give me 1 second, y'all. 2.2% black. Now that's in modern times. It was probably less in 2010. Can you imagine what that's like to be a black woman in Vancouver, Washington at that time? And everybody's looking for you because she described a black woman went and threw acid in her face. What it must be like to be a black woman at work that day. What it must be like to be a black woman, you know, driving at night, trying to get home, or in the grocery store, or in a space where you're the only one. So it turns out Bethany lied. She made the whole thing up. She threw the acid on her own face and then went and blamed it on some black folks. So you constantly see folks just kind of latch on and say a bunch of things. And so that's why a lot of times, like Casey Anthony, Bethany Storrell, all these folks, I'd be looking at them sideways because half the time they be lying. And it goes back to Carolyn Bryant with Emmett Till. Like you just constantly get that. And I think it goes back to the history we've had in this country where when you go back to the 1600s, the 1700s, the 1800s, something like sex. And I'm speaking from the standpoint of the imaging that they used to put on black men. Because even like Birth of a Nation, the film from 1915, the imaging of black men was that we were these violent, feral, sexual beings who operated off instinct. We had no self-control. We just wanted to sleep with white, virtuous women because And then when it came to black women, the imaging that they had was that they were hypersexual beings that had no feelings, that had no values, no personality, and you had to be careful around them because they would steal your husbands, they would destroy your lives, they would do anything for that wild sex. When in reality, a lot of, especially when you talk about during slavery and during sharecropping and even during convict leasing, a lot of white men fetishized both black women and black men. Even when we talk about Jamaica and slavery there with like the sugar cane and everything, when you hear that conversation of like buck breaking, one of the things that a lot of white slave owners used to do, especially to the men, you go and take the biggest one you can find and you would rape them in the public square for everyone to see. So there was definitely this weird obsession with black sexuality coming from white slave owners, white America, white people, white colonizers, white people who were in power at the time. There was definitely this strange obsession with black sexuality. And so getting back to my point, it's so easy for people to constantly make up things and paint them on us because, again, the image of white women at the time, especially when we talk about 16, 17, 1800s, were that white women were virtuous. Sex was not even seen as something to celebrate. We're in a space now where people are a lot more sexually liberated. You do what you want. It is what it is at this point. But, back then, first of all, husbands and wives didn't even sleep in the same bed. Husband had his bed, wife had their bed. If it was time to do something, and I'm speaking of white America at the time, they get in one bed, they do it real quick, and I mean, they got the sheets over, nobody's watching, get it done. The purpose was just let's make some babies, or if it were anything, it was the guy just trying to get off at the woman's expense. It didn't matter how much she enjoyed it or not. He was going to get his, and it is what it is. If you can't give it to me, I just go out to the slave quarters and take one of them. That was the imaging. So I think that has traveled generationally, where this is why, even like I was saying again with even in hip hop, how a lot of black women in hip hop are hypersexualized, right? And it kind of goes back to like a Sarah Bartman kind of thing. And I think that even indirectly ties into the conversation of like BBLs. And I'm not judging anybody who chooses to go and do anything, but I'm just making an observation about what it is that society has deemed valuable in regards to black women, and what society deems as character traits of black men. So we're just in a space where there's a lot of nonsense, and the media will give that a platform all the time, which is why Casey Anthony gets a platform, because the media at this point in time, they're always going to follow where the money goes. And Casey Anthony is somebody nobody has heard from since she got off for not only killing her child, but then trying to make up the story that she was assaulted by her dad just to kind of gain some sympathy and paint it on the dad. Then the dad was about to kill himself. It's all kind of wild stuff. That whole case, whoo, that was a time. But yeah, it's interesting. Casey needs no platform. I don't know why they gave her a show because she's still lying. I don't care. Let me read some comments. Oh, we're doing good. It's only been an hour and some change. I feel like we'd already been 2 hours. So let me get another sip of this ginger. You see my look cleared up right away. Now I will say it has some kick when it goes down. Like I was like, oh, this thing burning on the way down. I'm gonna start using that when I be in the studio. Let's see what we said. Christine said, I can't, with watching another movie or documentary about that poor baby, it's too much. And that old heifer still has not been arrested for her, I'll just say foolery. Yeah, that was one of the last ones I've seen. A lot of them I've skipped at this point, especially like after 12 years a slave. I said, I'm done with these. I will say, though, if you get the opportunity to come to DC and you go to the African American Museum of History and Culture, they do have an Emmett Till exhibit. The initial plans for the family was that they were going to have an Emmett Till museum. But they ended up in negotiations with the Smithsonian, and the Smithsonian promised that they would give Till a full exhibit in the museum. And so if you go there, they actually have the actual casket. They have these documentaries that are playing in there. You can kind of hear the mother's story. I think they have one of the actual pews from the church there. And so it's a very interesting exhibit. And one of the rules is you're not allowed to talk when you go in there out of respect for everything that's happened. So, when I be in there, I'd be ready to like slap people when I be hearing people whispering and talking. Especially if they look a certain way and I know they're not a part of my collective. You just be quiet and learn, okay? Because this is what your in-laws was doing 30 and 40 and 50 and 60 years ago. All right, anyway. Let's see, I'm going to keep it moving. Yeah, same thing I said about Casey. That woman was guilty. It was literally in our faces. And the story didn't make sense, but that's also the thing with law too. The defense never has to technically paint a story. They just have to poke holes in the prosecution. So the prosecution can have an entire storyline. If the defense can poke holes in it, the defense, the defense is not bound by anything, right? You need, in a criminal side, it's beyond a reasonable doubt for the prosecution. On the civil side, it's with preponderance of the evidence, right? Meaning more likely than not. So if you're a defendant on a criminal side, you just have to poke holes in the prosecution story. And so they're able to instill enough doubt where the judges, or not the judges, the jury was like, we'll just let her get off. You know, man, and killed your child and went to the club. Can you imagine? All right, I'm gonna keep going. Whew, Lord, give me the strength. One of these days, we need to just do a happy live where we only talk about some really happy stuff for like one day. Just some happy stuff, because sometimes my blood pressure be high. That's why normally when we close this, I try to close with music and stuff to kind of bring everything back. Because sometimes this is a lot to receive. Some people have often messaged me, they're like, Calvin, I love your content, but I had to unsubscribe because we appreciate, what you're teaching, but for me, it's just too much sometimes to take. And I fully understand. Like if it's too much, your mental health is everything first. Okay. The next thing, I got another race conversation. I don't know if you've seen this clip. It is a clip. I think it's out of Austin, Texas. I'm going to read the article really quick. Let me get another sip of this because now I need to turn my heat down in here too. I'm in here boiling. It's like I'm boiling greens right now. All right, here we go. All right. Pluggerville, teacher on administrative leave after racist comments in the classroom. All right. A middle school teacher is on administrative leave after inappropriate conversation with students in which he expressed his belief that his race is superior to others. I could honestly just stop reading there and go, but I do want to put this in context. In videos posted to social media of Bowles Middle School classroom, an unnamed white teacher, they're going to protect the name. White teacher and students are seen discussing race before a student asks, "So are you racist?" The teacher responds, "Yeah, how many times do I got to say it?" It's unclear how the topic came up, but videos posted by the parents and students from inside the diverse classroom show a confrontation about how race plays into grades, who is allowed to use the restroom, and the teacher's belief that people are dishonest about their views on racial superiority. He said, "Deep down in my heart, I am ethnocentric, which means that I think my race is a superior one." The teacher is shown in the video telling students, "I think everybody thinks that. They're just not honest enough to say it." The interaction does not align, and the school went ahead and said, "The interaction does not align with our core beliefs as a district." The video of the conversation includes statements that we find wholly inappropriate. The statement reads, "The adversary activity was inappropriate, inaccurate, and unacceptable. This type of interaction will not be tolerated at PFISD schools." According to the statement, the school district Human Resources Department is beginning an investigation into the incident. They always investigate. It's on video. So my thing is, at this point, you should have went home. That's it. Where do I start? So one of the reasons, like I've said before, that I always say it's important to not tap out politically is because a lot of times I think one of the most important elections that exists is the school board. These are the people that get to dictate what happens when teachers get caught up in some nonsense and it goes before the board. This is the group that gets to dictate what's going to go in the curriculum. This is the group that gets to dictate where the funding goes, what schools they're going to close, whether they're going to change the zoning laws. One of the most interesting things I've seen, and I'll speak for Fairfax County, Virginia again. So with my center, all three schools that fed into my center were further away from another school that was closer. So all of my elementary kids lived closer to this school called Hybel Valley Elementary, but they were bused all the way to Groveton Elementary. They all lived closer to Walt Whitman Middle School, but they were bused all the way to Carl Sandburg Middle School. They lived closer to Mount Vernon High School, but they were bused all the way to West Potomac High School. And the reason why is because the neighborhood that they lived in sat on the other side of Route 1, which is kind of the side that was neglected, and it's a conversation of redlining. On the opposite side is the side that tended to be a little wealthier, even though there was one specific collective called Gum Springs, which was a Black establishment that was founded after slavery. There's that one segment right there. But with the zoning laws, the way that they set it up was specifically the kids that would have lived in the neighborhood that I worked in and then the adjacent neighborhood. It's almost like people in charge didn't want those kids bused into certain schools, so they sent them further away to different schools. Some may say, "Oh, they just went to a larger school." But again, when we talk about busing and zoning where kids go, it's some nonsense. Understand? And that's why I say it's so important that, again, we don't tap out politically. I'm not married to any candidate, but all of this is important because something like politics is an ongoing thing. It never stops. Just because at the moment, I think that the Dems have the Senate and maybe might hold on to the House. Nothing is set in stone. Something is going to change in 2 years. There could be a politician that dies and they have a new election and they got to find a new spot. There could be a politician that steps out because they're caught in some kind of scandal, right? And it can shift power. But the thing is, because it makes me even think about like DeSantis from Florida, where he was having that speech and he said, because now the woke mob is saying that America was founded on stolen land. And we know that that's not true. These are the people in charge of what the world learns in regards to the children. in regards to the next generation, in regards to how the country will somehow be able to sustain itself. I don't know how, because we constantly, not we, but the country continues to suppress different groups and marginalize them so that they can never climb. And I'm sorry, whiteness is not going to be able to carry America, because at this point, the conversation in regards to whiteness was also the other aspect is wealth. And because there are too many white Americans that have nothing, eventually there's not going to be enough skill, enough labor, enough talent, because again, even with our politics, there has been divestment from even poor white communities. They can't run this country alone. You know what I mean? And by constantly trying to keep other people and other groups down, eventually this is just going to be a place where the elite and the super rich are the only ones who are able to prosper. Everybody else is going to be in some nonsense, and they're going to continue fighting each other. All right. And by the way, even in regards to his speech where he was like, yeah, this is to go, we're not going to be woke. I was like, understand, in regards to Florida, the turnout was 10% less than the previous midterm. So it's not like people were excited to put DeSantis in there, even though he still won by a large margin. And it kind of even goes back to another article I saw where there's the recently elected school board official that decided that they needed to have corporal punishment. Let me see where that's at. Oh yeah, let's see. This article, some guy named Rutherford, a Collier County School Board member, has spoken, and his words are shocking, to say the least. On Tuesday, newly elected member Jerry Rutherford said he wants to bring corporal punishment back to the district classrooms. He also said that it's disabled students' behavior that is particularly out of control. What I want to say to that, you guys remember how I've always said that in public school systems, Black kids are often put in remedial programs or special ed at a much higher rate than white children. Most of the time when they're putting students into those programs, a lot of students really have no cognitive disabilities at all. It's a behavioral issue. And it's a behavioral issue because a lot of the times these teachers have no understanding of culture of that student. Those students don't feel empowered, those students act out in class. It's already bad enough that I think we have a very awkward setup in regards to how we expect children to learn. But, again, things like that are coded language. Okay. It's kind of like the person that also was elected in North Carolina. Remember the commercial he had where he's like, if you have a problem with the police, the next time you need help, call a crackhead. Coded language. You know who he's talking to, and you know who he's trying to kind of vilify and paint as the problem. Like we see, and he won, right? And so understand, I've always felt that there are some flaws in our school system. I think there are some really great teachers, but I think there are also a lot of teachers who contribute to the downfall of youth. You know what I mean? There are teachers who, how can you be in a classroom and see yourself as superior to some of your students? You're never going to be invested in making sure that they are successful. If anything, you're going to be invested in making sure that they fail so that the group that you think is superior can continue to climb. So I'm sure when there's different opportunities where it's like, hey, we have this special opportunity for 3 students that are going to get to go to a STEM camp, and if they blah, 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 they get to go to NASA. I'm sure a teacher like that who feels that he's superior is not going to pick the Black kid to go to NASA. He's going to pick the kid that probably don't even care about science just because he wants, his collective to do whatever it is. But like I said, there are teachers that I think contribute to the downfall of many students. I told y'all before, my first grade teacher wanted me to repeat first grade, not because I didn't understand the material, not because I didn't act right in class, not because I was slow, but because she felt I wasn't mature enough to be in first grade. And she felt that if I could replace Miss Carlson, Beechwood Elementary, Joint Base Lewis McCord, at the time it was Fort Lewis, she wanted me to repeat first grade. My mom was like, hell no. So my mom moved me out of the school into another district. And then I think if you listen to my podcast, I talked about when I moved to Italy, and this old white man as a teacher, Mr. Robert Shaw. Mr. Robert Shaw had to be, I don't think he's probably living at this point because he was already about 70 then. Mr. Robert Shaw was like the old guard, man. Mr. Robert Shaw, all the other classrooms were finally starting to get the whiteboards with the marker. He didn't want to change that. So we still had the blackboard with the chalk. But anyway, he used to do this thing where you had to read your grade out loud in the class. And the problem was I was out of school for 2 months. Where when we were moving to Italy, my dad took me on this really long road trip across the country. And really it was because we were staying with a neighbor. Like we knew we were moving to Italy that January. And so I think my parents had sold the house maybe that September, that October. And we were going to stay with like one of the neighbors. It was a really good friend of my mom. We were going to stay with the neighbors until it was time we were still going to do the road trip, but the road trip was going to be more so in December once I was out for Christmas break. And so the problem was while staying at that house, unfortunately, the wife was in an abusive relationship. And so there would be many nights where I'd hear what was happening. This woman getting beat up and screaming for her life. And my dad was like, I can't have this boy in here with that. So he decided to pull me out of school. And he and I just went on this road trip across the whole country. Like we drove from Spanaway, Washington down into California. We visited all these relatives because it was also our way of just kind of saying goodbye to everybody for 3 years because we were going to be in Italy until 2000. And so We went to California. We stopped. We saw the Grand Canyon. He let me see Vegas. We went to Disney World. We stopped in Texas. And my mom eventually got out of there too. She flew and went to Oklahoma because one of her good friends, I don't remember what town it was, stayed in Oklahoma. I want to say Oklahoma City. So we went and visited them, and that was cool because her friend's son was like my best friend when I was like 5 or 6. So I got to see my good friend again, this kid named Darren. And then the whole family was in the car. My brother was actually in Georgia with my grandma and all of them. They wanted him to get to know that side of the family because he was only like 1.5. This story's getting somewhere. Stay with me. And then so we drove, like we went, like I said, Washington, over through Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, went up to Oklahoma, drove through Texas, stopped in Louisiana, got to Mississippi, stayed in Utica to see some relatives that my dad hadn't seen since he was a boy. Then we got to Savannah, which y'all know is my favorite place in the world. That's grandma's house. That was Disneyland. Stayed in Savannah. Then we drove up through the Carolinas to visit my mom's best friend. God rest her soul. Unfortunately, she passed in 2019. So went to the Carolinas to her. Then we went up to, my dad drove us through DC so I could see DC. And it's funny that I live here now. And then we stopped in Jersey because we flew out of Philly. Or we flew out of either Newark or we flew out of Philly. I don't remember which one, but I remember we went across the bridge. And then we went to Italy. So the problem was I hadn't been in school since probably the last week of October, right? So I was a little behind. And then, of course, when you do move, and mind you, my dad still had me doing like workbooks and stuff that he had on the road, like because when you're just driving, you're in the car forever. He'd play all the good music, but he'd have these different workbooks I had to work on and stuff. And when we get to the hotel, he would check it. And so I had missed like 2 months of school. So I was a little behind. In addition to, I was moving, I was in a new place. Dodds, which is like the school district for military families overseas, they have a different school system than at the time I was in Bethel Public School. So there were some things that even had I stayed in school, I wasn't going to learn it. And, I wasn't going to be prepared for what they were doing in Dodds because different places have different curriculums. And so Mr. Robert Shaw used to do this thing. We had a thing called S's, U's, and U minuses. S wasn't even an A. S just meant satisfactory. You did okay. S could be an A, a B, or a C. U meant you underperformed. And an S minus was like, I guess the S minus was like a D or something. Maybe an S minus might have been like a C, right? So we used to have to read our grade out loud after you did the peer review. And I kept getting all these U's. And one day, Mr. Robert Shaw, I was already embarrassed, right? I'm trying to play catch up. Mr. Robert Shaw was like, God damn it, Michael. This is the 15th U you've gotten. What is wrong with you? I'm like, I remember how I felt because it's like the whole class is staring at you. Everybody looking and everything. It's the worst feeling in the world. And I told this in the podcast as well. He was such a punitive teacher. And, we had the standardized testing too. And I'll always remember we had this thing called it was either the CTBS test or Terra Nova test. And I had to go to the bathroom. He would not let me go to the bathroom. And I ain't gonna lie, my parents did not play about school. Like they did not want no phone calls about getting in trouble at school. I ended up wetting myself in the class because I was that scared to go to the bathroom because I didn't want to get in trouble with Mr. Robertson because he said he'd send me to the principal and I didn't want that kind of smoke. I mean, fortunately, I had on like some light jeans. So once the test was over and we went to recess, I was just standing in the sun trying to dry off. But like, imagine how traumatizing that is. So like I said, you have a lot of teachers who ain't shit. Sorry. And you do have some that are really great. But, a hot mess. All right. Side note, I did see somebody was asking me about the crash in Dallas at the air show. Like, that's horrible, isn't it? Like, condolences to those who are affected by that. I think, people like to go to these events and just, see wow factor, but something like that is an image people will never forget because you realize what's happening right in front of your face. You know what I mean? Like, that's a very scary thing to witness. It was like this one time somebody got shot in a crosswalk in front of me when I was in Gallery Place one time. And I'm like, somebody just get, like, everybody ran. I was in just such cuckoo mode because I had just moved here. And I'm like, was that really just a shooting? My friend's like, Michael, let's go. I'm like, oh, okay. Like there's certain images you just never forget. Let me pause. All right. Okay. We talked about a lot, but I will say those kids in that classroom with the teacher that felt that he was superior, oh, they would let that man have it. And I love the fact that one kid said, I almost had respect for you, but this, that, and the third. And then, of course, the teacher tried to take control of the classroom and start putting his punitive foot down. I'm like, nah, stand in it. So I don't understand why there's an investigation and why he's on administrative leave. It means you need to let him go. He's already acknowledged the fact that he's not invested in the lives of those children. And like I've said before, I think a good teacher empowers their students, right? A good teacher has patience to meet a child where they're at. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, kids want to be heard and want to be recognized. They don't want to feel dismissed. Once they don't feel that there's that genuine connection with the person that they're trusting to teach them anything, then they're never going to be that exemplary student that you want because you already got a vendetta against them. What else was I going to say? Yeah. What else was I going to say? Yeah, because like I was saying, anyway, kids are trying to find where they fit in. And so when a kid no longer feels that they have agency in a classroom, they feel that, because even if there's a child that's behind, there's a reason why you see a lot of kids who don't want to participate because they're already so far behind that they're embarrassed to give an opinion or be called on because they don't want to be laughed at. A good teacher is going to ensure that that classroom is a safe space. It's already hard enough that kids have to sit down for 7, 8 hours and sit still. And we have these really strange curriculums sometimes, and everybody's going to learn different ways, right? And so the other thing is, for good teachers, the sad part is they have to play cleanup for the flaws of terrible teachers the following year when they get that student that has had so many teachers that gave up on them, and now they have to really fight and claw to try to bring them into a space where they're whole so that they can actually effectively learn. I will say one of my best teachers I had was my 5th grade teacher, this lady, Miss D'Antoni. That was the class where I got my very first A. And it was because well, she was also a brand new teacher too, I think. I don't know how old she was, but I knew she was really young, and we were her very first class. And so she just had like a lot of patience, and she gave every student ample time to shine, ample time to do things that made them feel important. Even in middle school, I had this teacher, Mr. Holdaway, in 7th grade. He knew I loved music, and I was such a loser. Me and some of my friends made this boy band one time. We were called BPM. It was my friend Brian. It was me and this kid, Patrick, BPM, Brian, Michael, Patrick. We never realized BPM also means beats per minute. I was like, see, I was already thinking. Mr. Holdaway literally let us have an award show in the class and let us perform our song. So, sometimes there are teachers that really, give you that space to shine. And so I don't mean to get on my soapbox, but like I was saying, the schools, it's a love-hate. There's some really great people out there, but there's also a lot of people that don't need to be there. And the schools need to be better funded. It still makes no sense that only 6% of the budget goes to education, but we're spending 2/3 on blowing up people across the water. Can't stand it. And like I was saying, rest in peace to those affected by what happened in Dallas with the Era show. And even with Aaron Carter, which was sad. I don't know. I think sometimes when people are child celebrities, there has to be a support system. And I think in his experience, his brother, Nick Carter, was already in like the biggest boy band in the world. So he already didn't have a normal childhood, but he also got signed at a really young age. You get that taste of fame. I think when you get fame at such a young age, if there's not a support system, if there's not a strong family structure as they matriculate and even support as they come into adults, because a lot of child stars do not transfer well into adult stars, there has to be that element of support. And I just don't think he really quite had that. And the other thing to understand is like the entertainment industry will chew you up and spit you out. And you have to kind of sometimes get in a space where you ask yourself, how much am I going to consume today? Even with this YouTube thing, in real life, yes, there's Calvin Michaels, but there's also Michael, my last name, right? Sometimes there will be events that take place in the world, and I'll get messages like, Calvin, you going to talk about this? You going to talk about this? And then sometimes when I'm thinking about what it is, I'm like, you know what? I don't have the energy for it, because I just think in that moment, thinking as Michael, I already know when I have this conversation, it's going to open the floodgates, and now I got to be called all kind of N-words and you stupid and blah, 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 blah. And so I'm like, do I want to subject myself to that today? No, not today. But sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm ready for the fight. Let's get it. So, I think with celebrities, they're not given that luxury because there's contracts that are signed, there's money on the line. And even when entertainers have substance abuse problems, mental health problems, it doesn't matter. They throw them out there. I will never understand how Fantasia Barrino attempted suicide and they had her on Good Morning America 3 days later to perform to promote the next album, and then also have her talk about what she attempted to do. I said, either this is not a real thing that happened or she has a very horrible record label. Because there's no way that somebody literally attempts to take their life and you throw them out there to go perform. Kind of nonsense. Goodness. All right, let's read some comments. I apologize that I haven't read a lot of comments today, guys. All right. Exactly, Ogechi. What is there to investigate? That's in response to the teacher. The video's right there. Maybe playing some games, man. We're investigating. What's going to happen is they'll just keep it under the radar, and he'll still be there next year. You know what I mean? Yep. Prime example. Corvette Shrell. I work in the town where the school is at, and I have not heard anything about this. Again, when we talk about what our media chooses to indulge in, you know what I mean? I agree, Queen. They bastardized the word woke, and now it's weaponized. So anytime there's any challenge to the status quo, it goes in the woke bubble. The same way that people use the term race card. You know what I mean? It's like you get nothing because the entire deck of cards you gave me is technically the race card through your lens. So no matter what I say, you're going to pass it off as a race card. And the problem with that is when you have terms that are automatically associated with specific viewpoints or ideals, it makes it easier for the general public to be dismissive. So you can throw everything under the woke bubble. You can throw everything under the race card. You can throw everything under the idea of victimhood, right? You know, what was so interesting when I did the Kanye video, because remember, we didn't really talk about Kanye. I was talking about the Liberty City riots. There were so many people in the comment section like, that's the problem with black folks. Y'all got to get out of that victimhood mentality. It's not a conversation of victimhood. It's a conversation of saying, in the past, these are all the things that have happened. And because those things have happened, you know, these are the conditions that some people unfortunately are in. But in spite of that, people will still climb and get to the spaces that they're in, but recognize that as people get to wherever it is that they're trying to be, recognize some people weren't given the same deck of cards. Some people weren't given a paved road. Some people were given a road that was chopped off. They set it on fire and sent people back and made them start over. And so it's not a conversation of victimhood. It's a conversation of highlighting the fact that systemically, there are groups of people that are at a high advantage, not because of hard work, not because they're so talented or so smart. I'm gonna get to these billionaires in a minute, but because there was a system that backed them. I've always said white America, the reason we had a white American middle class in the 50s and 60s was because the federal government gave white Americans handouts. The definition of handouts for them would have been the FHA loans. It would have been everything that was under the New Deal, and it would have been everything in the GI Bill. All of those things that black people were not a part of. And to ensure that black people would stay out of it, you made sure you had housing discrimination and redlining. So the FHA was not going to ensure mortgages for black folks. You know what I mean? Black veterans that were coming back from World War I, World War II, were not going to get the GI Bill. And understand the GI Bill, that can help people with education, that can help people with housing. They were left out of that. And so the conversation is, in spite of what y'all done did, you know, folks are going to get to where they need to be, but y'all are in the way. So can you get out the way? And if you're not going to get out of the way, can you shut up about what you think we need to do, unless you're going to cut back on some of your privilege and make things right the wrongs that exist. And so the burden of making black people try to correct the system of white supremacy is some nonsense. White folks are going to have to fix that, but they're not going to, because again, when you get the luxury to operate as the standard, they're going to fight and claw to protect that at any given, you know, any given means. It doesn't matter. Anyway, let's keep going. Queen said, whipping kids with paddles. That's what he wants again. I feel for the parents and young children. And you also know you got teachers that don't like students. They're going to be finding every reason in the world to be hitting some of these kids upside the head. And I wish I'd get a call that my child was struck by one of these teachers. Whew. Y'all might as well just get ready to see me on the news. I'm going to be a hashtag that day because everybody catching it. Somebody said they aren't even hiding it anymore. Exactly. Okay, Queen said it was Louisiana. So, okay, maybe it's Louisiana. My bad. I think it was us. I thought it was supposed to be by the near, whatchamacallit, Austin, Texas. All right. Sequoia Harrison, as intelligent as you are, Calvin, I'm so glad your mother stood up for you. And that's the other thing, too. I think parents are in a challenging space where there has to be that balance between what happens with the school and the relationship with the child. Because there's some parents who automatically are 100%, they agree with the school no matter what happened. One thing that made me so mad when I was at the center, I had this kid. He had always had problems. He was one of the most respectful kids ever, but he just didn't get along with other kids, right? So he always had some stuff going. And he never really had the best grades. And then finally, he started getting it together. Really, what happened was a bunch of kids came to beat him up. And I think he got shook. So it just made him stop doing some of the nonsense he was doing. And so for the first time, he had like all A's and B's and maybe like one C. There was a day where he was at school, they running in the hallways. The teacher put the hand up to say, hey, no running. And he smacked, he pushed the teacher's hand down. And so they suspended him for 2 months. And I was so mad because the mom would not go to, because they actually had a hearing with the school board to say, maybe we can look at this. Maybe this was too hard. The mom would not budge. She felt like that's what he get. That's what he needed. So he ended up having to repeat 8th grade over that. And it was kind of like, the school board meeting would have been to cut down the suspension to like 2 weeks instead of 2 months, because you recognize 2 months of school, you failed. There's no way to make it back up, because when children are suspended, or they don't get to do homework, they can't turn anything. Suspended means all services in connection with that school are cut until you are deemed eligible to be in a space, unless it's like an in-school suspension. And so I was so mad at the mom for that. I fought tooth and nail arguing with her about that, but she just wasn't budging. And there was kind of this element of fear because she had other kids too. And she was like, I don't want the school to go after my other kids because they're having problems. And so, he had to repeat that grade. I mean, he's an adult now, but I definitely think it played a role into the life he has as an adult. And that's one of the challenges I always ran into running the center. You can plant the seeds. Unfortunately, it's up to them to water it. And so sometimes I'm still waiting for some of these kids to water their seed, and God willing, they'll do it. But that pissed me off. I was so mad at the mom for like years about that. All right. But yeah, my mom wasn't having it. She was like, I know my son's not stupid. I just watched him build like this entire Lego city in his room, not with a guided map on how to do it. Like literally, I just bought him buckets of Legos and he's built this entire city in his room. It's all I'm stepping all over the Legos when I get in his room because he done built a basketball arena and a school and all this other stuff. There's nothing wrong with my child. So my mom wasn't having it. Anyway, okay. Nick Cannon. This won't be long because we didn't talk about him a million times. Child number 12. The only thing I'm gonna say, I get it. People keep trying to say it's okay because he has money. I think money is one aspect of parenting, but involvement is another. I just don't see, unless he has some kind of compound where everybody lives in the same space in the same proximity, there's just no way you can adequately give the kind of time that 12 children are going to need individually. And you're a celebrity, so you're already busy. These celebrities be on the road and they got different shows to do, and they got to travel to Europe for this and Asia for that, go to Africa for this and go to this place. They're never home already. So then the fact that there's limited time to be home, and now you got to spread that time between 12 children. I don't get it. Some folks were fighting me down about things. Even with my last video, I'm not going to talk about it because again, I said I didn't want to spoil the movie, but there were some comments being directed towards my video because they didn't like something that I said. And I'm like, I wonder if these are the same people that keep defending Nick Cannon for what he's doing. Are we going to have a double standard conversation, or are you 10 toes down with the issue no matter who it is? That's what I kept thinking about. But, I to each his own. I hope those children are able to get what they need. Because think about it, like kids want their parents to be at their basketball game, to go to the school recital. When the kid has a bad day at school, they want to tell their mom or their dad about it. They scrape their arm. They want dad to rub it on the boo-boo or whatever. You know what I mean? And even if dad means to be there, he got 11 other kids and they're spread out. He got to get on a flight to go to Denver. He got to go on a flight to go here. He got to get on a flight to go here. If a child gets sick and is in the hospital or something and he's on a movie set, there's just all these different things to think about. I'm not judging. I just have questions. And me personally, I just don't think it's healthy. You guys can feel how you want to feel. I just think sometimes money is not everything. One of the things I wish I could have had, like my father worked a lot. And so he wasn't home for a lot of my high school because his job had him living in Germany, Alaska, and Texas. As somebody who no longer has a father, I would have loved to have some of those years in high school with him. Even today, something that set with me that I think about is like, as an adult, and I'm about to cry on here. Hold on. Let me drink this and distract myself. Y'all about to get me teary-eyed. Hold on. Oh, shoot. As an adult, because my family was majority women, all of my uncles have passed except for one that I don't know. I have no male mentoring figures that I can confide in as a young male when it comes to relationships, buying your first house, all those kind of, that's gone for me. And so fortunately, at least my father was around for me to make it to like 26. But something that always ate me up is he never got to see me come into my own. Like he died before I started doing the music. He won't get to see the short film I'm working on. He never got to see, literally, I think I told you before, like my center, we were on the Today Show. Like my kids got to meet Obama. And they did like the scavenger hunt with Al Roker. It was Team Al Roker versus Barack Obama, and the kids got all this time with Barack Obama and scavenger hunt, like stuff like that. He never got to see. And I mean, fortunately, he told me he was proud of me before he passed. But you kind of want your parents to be there for those moments. You win some special award. You want to be able to say, "Oh, I love you, Mom. I love you, Dad." I always think back to even like when Rosie O'Donnell, I think she won an Emmy or something, and she talked about how the very theater they were in, it was a theater that her and her mom used to sit at and watch shows, and her mom would pass her like the popcorn, and she was just talking about how that memory was there. Like even as adults also need that support. And so I think for children, it is so hard when parents aren't around. And that's why even when parents are around, I want people to understand, yes, work, provide, but you still got to give them kids some time. Because, a lot of children grow up to resent their parents, especially children of celebrities where the parents were always on tour and everything. They never got that time to really bond and establish a relationship. And when they needed that space to understand who they were, the parents weren't there. They had to give it to the nanny. They had to give it to whoever the handler was. And so I think that's one of the sad aspects of life. You never know what kind of deck of cards you're going to get. And so for me, it's such a trigger every time I see that there's another baby coming. Now, if he can find some magical way for all of them to get, the Nick time that would be needed, cool, I guess. But no good. No bueno. All right. Let's switch gears here. Actually, I'll read a few comments. Um, hold on. Let's see. Salamatu Moray said, "Yeah, some of my parents are awful. She must be a teacher." Um, Javonna D said, "Yeah, that sounds horrible." And especially in the world we're in now, because again, kids, I think kids are exposed to a lot more, especially with social media. Kids have an idea of what's going on in the world. So when we're living in this space where you have the conversations around climate change, we have white nationalism running rampant. You have 1 in 5 children who are living in homes where they're starving. You have the threat of war for a lot of people. Every time one of my kids say they want to join the military, I'm like, please, there has to be another option. Is that really what you want to do? I don't know a lot of people who purposely want to join the military unless it's more so an opportunity to get out of their situation. And I think that sucks that you have to sign up to go kill people to do that, to have some element of prosperity. Because even when you get back, unfortunately, if something has happened to you physically, you're still treated as a second class citizen, especially if you're disabled. And I'll never tell people what to do, but like things like that, I think about. Um, and so, yeah, these kids have a tough world they're living in. And so you definitely need adults to be there. That's why I really believe the idea of it takes a village. I think for sadly, a lot of millennials and Gen Z, so many of us have traveled or relocated for careers. And so a lot of us don't even have those big support systems where, if you have a big, like if I were to have a child right now, fortunately, I got a lot of DMV family. But there are some people I know who it's just them and their husband or their wife. And when it comes to just simple things like, oh God, we got this event, I wish I had somebody to drop my child off at, they have no family. The idea of when the entire family stayed in the same area, grandma's house was down the street, auntie's house was down the street, everybody got together. For some people that doesn't exist anymore, because unfortunately people had to choose to try to better themselves and build a career so that oh Lord, stopped up, sorry, the next generation could thrive. And so I think it sucks sadly to be a parent in modern times because even childcare has gotten so expensive. I was just talking to the grandma of my godmom, or not my godmom, my goddaughter yesterday because it was her birthday. She just turned 5. They had to party at like a trampoline park. Um, what was I saying? She was saying when my friend who has a child that I'm the godfather of, when he was a child, daycare was $50 a week for 2 children. $50 a week. When I look at my poor goddaughter, her daycare is $1,300 a month, right? So for a lot of younger parents, we're just in a space where we're getting the leftover crumbs of what the boomers, the greatest generation, as far as the generation before the boomers, and some of the first half of Gen X got to benefit from. And then the latter half of Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z, we get the crumbs. We get the end result of all this punitive policy, bad ideas, bad laws, and we're paying for it. That's why that's why I ain't got a house. I'm still renting in my 30s. That's life. Okay. Anyway. Okay. I'm not worried about the trolls, guys. It is what it is. The trolls, like I said, I'm still monetized, so enjoy. Um, thank you, thank you, thank you. Exactly. JDG said, I feel that as a black man, I lost my dad when I was 11, and I really wish he could see me as an adult. Yeah, you want your people to see you. And even with my father's situation, the main reason why he took the job here, because listen, he was somebody who was able to defy the odds. He never got to finish high school, right? He went to Pittsburgh High School, the same high school from Coach Carter back in the day, right? And he ended up in the military, right? And so he wasn't the best reader. He wasn't. There was a lot of things he wasn't super great at, but he took the time to try and learn, right? So he ended up, by then the military did have a GI Bill by then, so he was able to go and get a degree. And when he finally was able to, well, after he got out the military, then he worked at the window factory. They were paying him like $8 an hour for years. He had the night shift. So even as a kid, when he was home, dad had to be asleep. You couldn't wake up dad. Don't go bother him asking to go outside because he's asleep. He got to work from 12 to I think 10 or something like that. So when he finally did get this great job that paid all his money, he kept having these assignments where he'd have to leave for 3 months, 6 months, 8 months. And the main reason was because they knew I wanted to go to college. So it was like, how are we going to afford this? Because college has gotten expensive. So it's the way that everything ties full circle, which is why I was glad I was able to finish. And at least he got to see me get the degree. You know what I mean? And not only that, but get a degree from a school I wanted to go to. So, okay, we've talked about so much. This has been like a real deep live tonight. All right. Ashley J, I'm in my 30s trying to move out of my parents' home, but we live in New York. And shoot, man, listen. All right, I fully understand. If you knew how much my rent is and what it's about to be after next week, my God. All right. Yeah, D, my dad is from Pittsburgh. Well, he was born in LA, and then for a portion of his childhood, he was raised in Utica, Mississippi, and then he lived in Pittsburgh, California, which is like in the Bay Area. So it's like right by Antioch, and we have a lot of family in like Richmond, Benicia, all those areas over there and stuff like that. Okay, Elon Musk and Twitter. My God. Remember when I said that wealth does not always equal intelligence? I'm glad we're seeing it in real time. One of the beefs I've had with so many public figures, celebrities, people who are super, super wealthy, they always think that because they have wealth, they know all the answers. Because they have wealth, they know what's best for everybody, even though no one summoned for them. I will never understand why Elon thought he needed to purchase Twitter. You already had Tesla. You got them shooting rockets to the moon. You got all this other stuff. And something told you needed to also take Twitter too. And he got in there, then laid off all those people, came in there carrying a sink, let that sink in. And some of the poor people that worked there, they were trying to be welcoming and take selfies with him. I'm like, if y'all only knew what's coming down the pipeline with this man, because if you paid attention, he's not the brightest bulb in the box, to be honest. He's just, fortunately, again, South African apartheid, a whole bunch of generational wealth you already came into, and then you pay a bunch of people to do all the work. And he's not the one who made the Tesla, all these people that you can pay to do everything, and then you get to reap the benefits, right? So he has all this wealth, chooses to buy Twitter, and it's been so entertaining watching him just literally destroy this social media platform in what, a week, maybe 2 weeks? Nothing was more entertaining than watching the Twitter blue thing happen, right? Where all of a sudden people can get the verified checks, right? Before Twitter Blue was a thing, or before he tried to do whatever he just did that he already took back, if you wanted to have a verified, account on Twitter, there were a bunch of different things that you had to meet in relation to criteria. Woo, that ginger just got in my eye. All right, so I'm gonna just talk with this eye closed for a minute while it keeps burning. But there were a bunch of different criteria that were there. Like you had to have, I forgot how many articles, like tons of articles that had been published in your name, or you had to be like there's just all these stipulations, right? And so he made this thing where it's like, well, if you just paid $8, you can get a blue check. And so you had all these people get a blue check, pretend to be different celebrities, and so people started to pretend to be different companies, right? And so you saw one of the pharmaceutical companies all of a sudden tweet that insulin would be free, and then their stock started to plunge. They were losing like tens of millions of dollars by the minute. And then there's nothing like watching these companies have to go back on Twitter and say, unfortunately, we were hacked. So no, you're not going to get free insulin. We're investigating this. We're going to get to the bottom of this. You saw some of the air defense or defense contracting companies tweet different things and their stocks went down. You saw all these people pose as different corporations or pose as different celebrities. And so it just goes to show, like, people honestly think sometimes because they are celebrities or because they're wealthy, they know everything. My eye is kicking my ass right now. And so they think that they know everything, right? And so nobody can check them because they have this mentality of, well, you're poor, so shut up. And so watching him lay off all those people and then try to ask them to come back. Okay, all right, we messed up. Can y'all come back? I'd be like, hell no, I'm not coming back. If I were some of the people that were laid off, and I think there's a lawsuit too, I would get together with the ones who were laid off. We start our own company. We'll start a new social media platform because we're the best of the best engineers. You have nothing without us but your ego. You know what I mean? And so also pay attention to what's happening with these media platforms. Look at who owns a lot of these things. Look at how now you have him in charge of Twitter. His argument was all about free speech, and that's why he wanted to take it over. And you see him just saying a bunch of nonsense to the point where even Twitter has to correct some of the things he said. So when he tried to defend the price of insulin and say, oh, that's how it's always been, Twitter was like, actually, no, incorrect. When these different lobbyists and groups got into big pharma back in the 90s, the percentage increased by, like, I forgot what percentage, but it's way over 100, right? They had to literally correct him. But look who now owns things like Twitter. Look who's now running CNN. Look at what they're doing over at MSNBC. Look at who owns Fox News. Look at who owns these outlets. Even something like Vlad. I wish entertainers would stop going there. A lot of these corporations and the people that are owning some of these things are not good for the collective and not good for Black folks at all, right? And I think one of the things about Twitter, thank you, Sexy Alley Cat. Oh, my eye's good now. It's not burning no more. Thank you, though. Oh, that thing was not playing no games. I remember one time, I had one kid whose mom was from Kumasi, Ghana, and she made me this. It was so good. It's like this pepper soup. That thing was hitting, right? That little juice splash, because I was trying to tear apart the little chicken. That juice went by eye, and the stew had a ghost pepper in it. You might have had to take me to the hospital. Oh God, I was under that sink for a good minute. All the kids thought it was funny. They laughed. I'm getting mad. Anyway, so but understand a platform like Twitter has literally been a platform that was able to connect people from various spaces. It was a platform that was great for people to organize. We would have never heard about Trayvon Martin without something like Twitter. Ferguson would have never become what it was in regards to the national attention towards police brutality if something like Twitter didn't exist. I think even politically with these elections, I think the political landscape would look very different without something like Twitter. And so again, the sad part is you had somebody who at this point has let their ego and their pride bring this multi-billion-dollar company down. I heard that they were having financial issues, but clearly his tactics are not going to be the solution. And you have advertisers who have pulled out. And I really do think it would suck if Twitter did go down. I think it changes the landscape of how people interact, how people receive information. A lot of the information I get when I do these lives come from people who are posting news stories because the mainstream media is not talking about it. You know what I mean? I think even with, I do feel like society's having kind of like a collective awakening with a lot of things. And so it's more common to see people talking about, you know, reparations, talking about things that have happened in the past, talking about predatory lending, talking about what's happening in healthcare, talking about what's happening in academics, what's happening with this affirmative action case, what's happening in our, like there's so many spaces where people can now put information out there. And I think getting rid of something like a Twitter puts more power into the hands of mainstream media outlets. Again, remember, our media is literally owned by like 6 corporations. That's it. Everything comes from the same 6 corporations. And so, you know, it leads us into a space where you can really make people real dumb, lock them back into stupidity when information is no longer common knowledge. And I think that was one of the gifts that Twitter had. I still think there was a lot of nonsense on Twitter. I think there's a lot of nonsense on Facebook as well. But I think Twitter, especially for Black people, Twitter is a space where Black people can collectively chop it up. And it's so funny because folks are like, how do we get to Black Twitter? You can't. If you don't know any Black people, you don't know who to follow, right? And so it's almost like Black people get to have their own secret conversation right here on Twitter. I do think Black folks eventually are going to have their own platform that they own. And, you know, because I think the conversation of ownership plays a role into everything. And we've seen what happens when you have very, very wealthy entertainers who have a lot and think that they're wealthy. And as soon as something hits the fan, that wealth just starts getting snatched. Contracts get ripped up. They take this and they steal different products, ideas. And before you know it, give it 2 years, that entertainer is at rock bottom that quick, which is why I think ownership is everything. I made a video about that when I was kind of mad at Steve Harvey when Monique was on there. And he did this whole speech about we're Black. We got to almost pretty much play the game. And I was so mad at him when he said that. But what I also didn't know was at the time, he was $16 million in the hole with his taxes. And that explained why he had so many jobs. He was hosting Family Feud. He was hosting the radio show. He was hosting the one show with the little kids on it. He was hosting his talk show. He had all these different things he was doing because he needed to make back up all that debt. So unfortunately, he was in a space where that same game, that same system was trying to make an example out of him. Fortunately, he was able to climb out of it. But to watch him kind of just berate Monique, who I felt was absolutely right in regards to demanding what she felt was owed, that broke my heart to see that. And then you did it in front of a bunch of white folks who were going to sit there and applaud and endorse it. Of course, they're going to applaud because, yeah, you get back to the place you're supposed to be in. It's kind of like when Trump was running and he told Black America, what do you have to lose? And he gave all the stats about what was wrong with what affected Black Americans. And he was absolutely right in regards to the flaws that existed. But I'm like, if you're going to bring that up, we also need to bring up the issue of why things are the way they are. But what was so interesting was watching all the white people in the audience. Yeah. And I'm like, you are the reason, all this stuff. Okay. But, you know, that's where we're at. But anyway, Elon Musk, humble yourself, sir. Just because y'all are rich don't mean y'all got all the answers. That's why I don't like when they put celebrities on these panels to discuss conversations in politics or race, or that they constantly only use celebrity to get people excited about what's happening in the world. Celebrities can be a tool. I do agree. But celebrities should not be the end all be all because celebrities' job is to be a celebrity. Their job is to shine in what it is that they do, whether it's being an entertainer, being an athlete, you know, doing whatever they do well. There is no reason why an entertainer or some public figure on social media that does not talk politics or research politics, but does like influencing, should be on any panel about reparations and talking about they don't see themselves as a victim and I'm not a victim and reparations is for victims and I am not one. And then when you go and you figure out where his lineage is from, his family were never even slaves in the United States. That's the kind of nonsense we deal with. You know what I mean? Shifting gears, I also want to say to some of these leaders, Boyce Watkins, I'm looking at you real sideways because you were definitely on this movement where you were telling black people to invest in cryptocurrency a few years back. I remember that, right? I'm just going to say this for people who want to invest in different things, if you don't have it to lose, you don't have it. And I thought it was so dangerous that he took the time to say, yeah, Bitcoin is the wave. And he had said, yeah, if you would have been somebody who invested in Bitcoin back in this year, you'd be a billionaire by now. And to latch on the vulnerabilities of demographics who already are in a space where they're trying to do the best that they can do. Having them believe in some nonsense. Yes, there's a lot of folks who got wealthy from cryptocurrency, but they already had it to lose. And so trying to convince people, put your money into this, put your money into that. And now we see FTX has crashed. This $32 billion corporation that sold cryptocurrencies. And mind you, crypto's been crashing all year. I'm not gonna lie, I put some of my money in it back in 2021 and I panicked because I was like, oh, nope, they're taking too much. And so as soon as it got back to what I put in there, I took that crap out and put it right back into one of my actual portfolios. I was like, never again, right? I do want to read a part of the article really quick with that. Sam Bankman Fried's Alameda quietly, something like that. Oh, Fried's Alameda quietly used FTX customer funds without raising alarm bells. Understand that FTX ended up becoming a Ponzi scheme. If you've ever seen a show like American Greed, it's one of those shows where it talks about how people get really rich at the expense of other people. They promise big returns if people invest. And what they end up doing is that they literally go and use other people's money to fund the company, right? They're not bringing in enough revenue because they've lied when it comes to the audits. They've lied about how much they have. They've lied about what's really there. And they tell people and promise and give them the world, yeah, we're going to have this much. You're going to get this much in return. You're going to get all these things. And then if something happens and people want to pull their money out, there's not enough cash flow because the company is not as valuable as the amount of money that they're stealing from the people. Let me keep reading. This is why Trump is getting sued in regards to Trump Tower, where he lied about how much the property was worth. Like that's one of the reasons why he has a civil lawsuit. Alameda Research, a trading firm founded by Sam Bankman-Fried, was trading billions of dollars from FTX accounts and leveraging the exchange's native token as collateral, according to a source. Many employees and outside auditors were unaware that FTX did not have enough money to match customer withdrawals. Right? 3 sources familiar with the company told CSNBC that they were blindsided by FTX's missteps and that only a small cohort knew about the potential misuse of customer deposits. The crypto exchange drastically underestimated the amount FTX needed to keep on hand if someone wanted to cash out, according to the source. Trading platforms are required by the regulators to hold enough money to match what customers deposit. They need the same cushion, if not more, in the event that a user borrows money to make a trade. According to the source, FTX did not have nearly enough on hand. Its biggest customer, according to a source, was the hedge fund Alameda. The fund was partially able to cover up this activity because the assets it was trading never touched its own balance sheet. Instead of holding any money, it was borrowing billions from FTX users, all those people who were told to go and invest in this and invest in that, the source said. None of this was disclosed to customers. To CSNBC's knowledge, in general, mixing customer funds with counterparties and trading them without explicit consent, according to U.S. securities law, is illegal. It also violates FTX's terms of service. Sarah Bankman-Fried declined to comment on the allegation of misappropriating customer funds, but did say its recent bankruptcy filing was a result of issues with a leveraged trading position. In the past week, actually, before I get that, the price of the FIT token, that's the token that they were specifically using for FTX, nosedived 75% in a day, making the collateral insufficient enough to cover the trade. In the past week, FTX has crashed from a $32 billion cryptocurrency powerhouse into bankruptcy. The blurred lines between FTX and Alameda Research resulted in a massive liquidity crisis for both companies. Bankman-Fried stepped down as the CEO of FTX and said Alameda Research is shutting down. The company has since said it's removing trading and withdrawals and moving digital assets offline after a suspected $477 million hack. When asked about the blurred lines, between his companies in August, Bankman-Fried denied any conflict of interest and said FTX was a neutral place of the market infrastructure. So, understand, we've seen this before, right? You saw this with Enron. That's one of the reasons why we saw a huge market crash in the past, where again, you have these companies, they're lying about how much they have, and they're using what they're bringing in to fund the lifestyles of the top execs to pay and finance for different things, and they don't have enough money in their bottom line if every investor decided to pull out. That's what happened with FTX, and now you have these people who are out, totally out. Because understand, cryptocurrency was doing really well in 2019, 2020. I think Bitcoin had made it to, 65 thousand points or something like that. So some people were making a lot of money, and then it just started going down and going. And so like Ethereum or Bitcoin or all these other ones, they were all crashing. Even Dogecoin, Elon Musk again, right? Went on Saturday Night Live and showed what an idiot he was, and then Dogecoin started to crash after it had just been rising and people lost money. So understand, like, if you don't have it to lose, don't put your money into some nonsense. All right. I always say, if you want to go the safe route to make sure you always have money, like I think some of your money should be in the bond market. Some of your money should be into like, low risk loans. Some can go into higher. You have to have a balance where if something goes down, you're not losing everything. The money I did have when I invested it at the time, I was told the economy was going to crash. So I put everything into stocks and bonds. And so when the economy did start crashing, I didn't lose anything. Mine actually went up. And then as time progressed and I started coming into a little bit more, I started, moving it around and putting it into different places. But everybody's experience is different. And I am not rich, by the way, so don't be fooled. All right. I'm just thinking of retirement because I recognize I don't know what millennials are going to do. Anybody who is from the silent generation or the greatest generation or the baby boomers, the benefit that they have with retirement is that they have 401k, they have Social Security, and they most likely have a pension. Millennials don't get pensions at this point. We don't know if Social Security is going to be here, and 401k still takes 50% of everything. And so, unfortunately, we're going to have to find additional assets and additional pockets of wealth to ensure that we'll have enough to retire, because there's no guarantee that Social Security will even be here. You see that politicians keep trying to chip away at it right now, and they're trying to say it's a dependency for people to not work hard. I'm like, sometimes if I can meet some of y'all on the street, I swear. This almost reminds me of like Fyre Fest. Remember the guy, he was gonna have that big giant musical festival, and he promised all these different things. We're gonna have people can swim with the pigs and the dolphins and private jets and luxury villas, and we're gonna have top-notch cuisine, and we're gonna build all this stuff. And he was trying to do clearly what would be like an 18-month to a 2-year project in 6 months. He didn't have the money for it. Every time they ran out of money, he found new ways to get people to put more money into it. Okay, well, you guys buy these special bracelets. We're not going to use cash. So you have to load cash into the bracelets. So as they're in the hole, he's using all the revenue that came in from people buying these bracelets to go and fund whatever else he had. He had to fly off and go get a $2 million loan from somebody. And it's so funny because it's interesting to see who is allotted money just with anything. When Black folks be trying to get something, our stuff stays getting denied all the time. Oh, we're sorry. We just don't think, like, go back to the 90s. You know how many people were trying to open Black-owned vegan restaurants, and banks were like, we just don't think that's a viable investment for your neighborhood. You guys kind of like chicken. The stereotypes that are there. And so it's interesting to see that this man was able to just go and get $2 million here because the lady was like, he was charming. I was like, that's all it took? If that's the case, I could be the most charming person in the world. I would love to have been in a capacity to go and find some big investor and they can fund my short film so we can just make it a full feature-length film, and I got an extra 400K or something to spend on. But no, I had to sit here and network and ask some of you all for help, which I am so grateful for. Thank you all so much. And I'm definitely coming out of pocket a whole lot of money to help fund this. But to watch people just be able to just walk into doors and here you go, right? And so he did all that. The festival never happens, right? They didn't have the villas ready. And then he exploited all of the people of that island, where he told those people he had jobs for them and they would get a great reward at the end. These people worked day and night, building the villas, trying to build the stage, trying to do all these different things, right? And it all started because he was so hard-headed. He initially had a different island he was going to use, and the people said specifically, you can use this island, but do not market it as like the Pablo Escobar Island. He did that, so they said, nope, you can't use this island. So they had to find another one, some island that's, it's pretty much like, I feel like it's almost like an industry kind of island where there's not much on it, right? And then at the same time, he wasn't paying attention because they moved the festival. There's like this big giant sailboat festival that happened. So all the hotels would have been booked. So he couldn't book extra hotels for the villas. Like all kind of things happened, right? But when it was all said and done, the concert, the festival was canceled. All the artists pulled out. The stage wasn't ready. They didn't have food. They took advantage of the poor lady who had the food business, where somehow she was supposed to all of a sudden feed thousands of people out of her little restaurant that's the size of my living room. And she was out of money. All those workers were out of money. And then the people who organized the thing skipped town because they knew people were after them with pitchforks. And so all those people worked so hard for months and got nothing. And that's why I'm saying, like, people will scam so much and utilize the vulnerabilities of people to get in the door. Like I think he gets an interview too. They're giving him some other interview. I don't need to hear nothing he has to say. There's just so many people who have wealth and they do terrible things. It's kind of like the guy who, he bought was that the medicine for people with HIV, and he skyrocketed the price, like, I forgot, like 1,000+% and was unapologetic about it and was bragging about it. I looked at Charlemagne the God and the Breakfast Club so sideways, like, why would you have him on his platform and then let him say that bull crap and then give him a pass? Like, understand, something like HIV has definitely affected the Black collective. and still does. And even globally, like how I've been ready to fight some people. Sometimes I'm like, we should just have a day where everybody just throws hands. Like, just let everybody get one day. This sounds like the purge. Just let everybody get one day to throw hands. I got a list. I just be looking at like if I had the chance, mm, it won't change much, but I'll just feel good about it. But yeah, I just hot mess. Anyway, I'm gonna pause with all the heavy content because I think we talked about a lot. So I'm gonna read some comments and then we can just chat about music for a little bit and call it a night. Man, that those Fire Festival documentaries are very entertaining. There's one on Netflix and there's one on Hulu. But it also goes to show how people are willing to make really stupid decisions to feel exclusive. You know, they marketed this as the exclusive festival that only the top-notch people will get an opportunity to go to. And you know, all of these big influencers that, hey guys, today I made pancakes and these are how my pancakes look. Thanks guys, bye. And they make like $2 million. All of them put all kind of money in. And there's a scene where they land and there's a yellow school bus that's picking them up and driving them over a rock, like a gravel road. I said, you know what? Enjoy, folks. And then the people didn't even have a place to sleep. They had to lay in like these tents overnight. And there was a whole like tropical storm that hit the night before. All the tents were ruined. The beds were soiled and soaked and chaos. I would have beat him up if I was there. He would have caught it. And even if it wouldn't have just been, we would have threw hands, something. Nobody was leaving that island until I got my money back. And I would have fought with the people on the island too. You're going to give them what's theirs as well. Okay, we're going to read comments and then we're going to shift to some happier stuff. All right. Thank y'all for hanging with me tonight. This has pretty been this has been a really heavily attended Zoom, not Zoom, live. You know, normally I usually have about like 500 people. Today it's been about 800, so that's cool. Thank you guys. Let's see. Hey, Bibby said, it's smart to run Twitter where you can get access or where you can get any messages out to the world. You know, the dum-dums like herd mentality, large media companies, examples swing the stock market. But yeah, like even the stock market moves with what's happening in the media, right? It moves what's happening. And even when they keep trying to say recession, it's like they're trying to just go ahead and launch it so we can fall into one. Because you know, when there's a recession, corporations make a lot of money when they get to buy into the dip. You know, when you get to, you know, a bunch of different things. They are fighting for that, right? All right, D, you ain't lying right here. Vlad is a Russian making money off black people. He doesn't show his face because some people think he's black. I don't think he's black. That's speaking voice to me. I just feel like you can tell somebody's race based on the texture of their voice a lot of times. Like when I on the phone, I can tell if somebody's black. I can tell if somebody's white. I can tell like a lot of times just that tone and texture. Because I tried to explain this in college one time and the class fought me because nobody understood what I was trying to say. I was saying in regards to singing, there is something unique about the black voice that is just it separates black people from other people when it comes to singing ability. One thing I've noticed is like a lot of white powerhouse singers, specifically the women, have a really hard time doing low notes. And it's because a lot of times white women don't have heavy voices, but a lot of black singers, even sopranos, are able to sing in low pockets, even if they can sing into the highest. And I think that's because the textures of our voices are very different sometimes. So like somebody like a Jennifer Hudson can sing way down there if she wants to, and then go way up there, and there's still a heavy bottom to it, or she can sing in the middle. You know what I mean? Somebody like in gospel, Jessica Reedy, if you're familiar with her, she probably can sing lower than I can, right? You have these people that can go into these really low pockets. Layla Hathaway, a beautiful lower register, but she can still go up there if she wants to. Like, I think you don't get that everywhere with every voice. So there's just certain things. So anyway, I was trying to explain that to the class, and I was trying to say is the way that we deliver music correlated to our experiences generationally in regards to like slavery, pain, trauma, and all that. The whole class like, ah, you're doing too much. You're doing too much. I was like, whatever, we're fine, and F all of y'all. And so, yeah. All right. Kim Possible said, Black Twitter is so fun. I have so many laughs on Twitter. Like, I think for a lot of people end their nights on Twitter with a good laugh. There's just so many things that are always really funny. Twitter is such a good laugh. And again, you get a lot of insight, a lot of information about things. You find out about different businesses. I think TikTok is kind of slowly turning into that in regards to promotion when people are trying to push, you know, their own cooking businesses or restaurants and stuff. But I just think Twitter has this way of just sharing things and how certain even tweets that were tweeted years ago will resurface, right? Or Different conversations come back. Effie Grace says Soldier Boy is talking about starting his own version of Twitter. I wouldn't trust him with my data. All right. Thank you, Tina McCann. That's actually my plan. She said, Calvin, assuming you would consider purchasing a house in DC, they have programs. That's exactly what I am doing. I'm just waiting for interest rates to go back down a little bit, and I'm gonna jump into that program because they have a really great one where they will help you with up to $200,000 off of that property. It's hard though because DC you don't really get yards, so it's kind of like okay, it's DC, Maryland, Virginia. Virginia you pay too many taxes. I just love being in the city, so I really would love to own a home in DC, but I also kind of like being secluded. One of my good friends has this beautiful house in Maryland because they just have land. Like I love trees and water. Like my end goal when I come into some real money is to have a lake house. I love being by the water, but I don't want to be by the beach because they have too many storms. I don't want to be by the river because it floods too much. But lakes that are not fed by rivers that are just there, they just be chilling. Like I would love to have a lake house. Anyway, maybe I should get married so I can have a dual income. That might help. All right. Tyler Hackman said I didn't trust crypto. Old dude followed the Enron route. And then the other thing, when these companies crash, some of the main people that are collateral are the employees who have trusted their livelihood with these companies, who meant well. And sometimes these people are such crooks, they'll bring people on and say, yeah, you stay with this company for this long, you're gonna get this percentage of stock. And then they change their minds. Like, actually, no, you're not gonna get any of that. That was one of the things that happened with Motown Records. Barry. He had promised a lot of people that had been working there would get a certain portion of the stock, and he changed his mind. That was real effed up, Barry. Excuse me, sorry. Sochi314 said, I don't think Social Security will be here when I'm of age, and I'm saving that way. That's pretty much why the money I've been able to save, I'm not spending it on anything lavish. It just goes to what I think is going to need to be for my retirement. Billy Flood said, don't ever let me meet Mitch McConnell. I am so happy to see that he will not be Senate Majority Leader because he's one terrible man, just cold-hearted and evil. It's one thing to not agree with people's policy, but when they're just evil and they think everything's a joke. I'll never forget 2020 debates when the person said all of the things that he had done that negatively affected people in Kentucky, and then he laughed. He had no response to what was being accused. He had no solution, but he thought it was funny. I'm just like, ooh. Mm, mm, mm. Mm, mm, mm. Y'all been going in on this chat tonight. Woo! All right. Where are we at here? Yeah, I appreciate this commentary, guys. You guys have really been giving it in. Ugichi said 50 years from now, social scientists will be able to look at Vlad's catalog and learn a lot. Because there's a lot you get out of these interviews that they have because people reveal a whole lot. But I personally feel like he's an agent and he plays a role into why some of these folks be getting arrested. Not even gonna lie. Anyway, I do have some news that sucks. I will not be able to review the AMAs or the Soul Train Awards because I won't be here. So unfortunately, I'm going to miss it. And y'all know the Soul Train Awards is my favorite award show because that's the one where the actual singers show up, where you get those great vocals. And I really want to see how they were going to honor Escape. So it kind of sucks I won't be here, guys. Sorry. But I'll try to make up for it. But yeah, I'm so mad about that. All right, what else are we talking about before I wrap up? I don't know who's hosting it as far as the Soul Train Awards. When is the Soul Train Awards? I believe it's the 30th of November. It's that Sunday. The Soul Train Awards is always the Sunday after Thanksgiving, right? Yeah. All right, my eye is no longer burning. It didn't help. I got a light right here that's like cooking my face, so it was making my eye just roast. I felt like I could feel the ginger just bubbling, like you done put some bacon on the pan or something. All right. All right, where are we? Somebody said, love them some Bobby Caldwell. What you won't do for love. I really enjoyed the Phyllis Hyman version of that. That's a great one. And there's a clip of her performing it on David Letterman. It's a really great performance. I love some Phyllis Hyman. I hope one day somebody is able to, tell her story. Even if it's not a biopic, I'd love a documentary. I think there's so many great talents we don't know a lot about, but they contributed so much. to the industry, and they're kind of people you never knew about. So even like somebody like a Mary Clayton, how she was on so many of the songs that literally are the soundtrack to America, and people would have never known, right? Um, like Sweet Home Alabama might not be the best example, but she's on like that song or those Joe Cocker with Little Help from My Friend song. She was an Ike with Ike and Tina. Like she's on a lot of work, and people would never know. I mean, I'm glad there was a documentary about her, the 20 Feet from Stardom or 25 Feet from Stardom, that featured her and some other supporting vocalists. But there's some really great entertainers out there who we don't know a whole lot about. I wish more people could know about Adina Washington. I wish more people would know about Nancy Wilson. I wish people would know a bit, even in modern times. I wish more people knew about like Ashanti Moore, um, Peeble Bryson, Glenn Lewis, Kashif. I'm always naming all the old school people. There were just so many really talented people that a lot of folks just don't remember, unfortunately. Mtume, rest in peace. But there's just so many greats that have contributed so much. So I would love more content that kind of highlights. This is why if I had the money, I would definitely start a music channel, and it would kind of go the route that VH1 went, where it was like a music history channel. Because I've said a million times, back in the day, most of what I learned in music came from watching VH1, because they always had these historical music shows. MTV had a few things too, like biorhythm and ultrasound and stuff, but VH1 was where you went to when you wanted to learn about everybody, not even just your favorite genre, but the other ones and everything like that. I would have loved to have a network that pushes something like that. One of the things I'm thinking about doing, even with the So It Happened series, is I want to do the flip side of the series, where I take an artist who may have been in a slump and then they make a comeback, right? I've really been thinking about doing the Mariah. I want to maybe do Glitter to Emancipation. I was thinking about that. Some of the other ones. I almost was thinking, this might be a little too old school. I was almost thinking about even the Temptations when they made the comeback after working with Rick James, because they definitely went on a slump. We'll see. But I would love to have a network that just focused on music, or even if it wasn't a network, just a show. I think we need a performance-based show that celebrates music. I wish Arsenio Hall show would have made it the second go round, but there's just no platforms right now for Black entertainers. They only get the award shows. And we know that the award shows are selective with who they're going to push. This is why I like the Soul Train Awards, because a lot of times some of the A-listers and B-listers are too good for the Soul Train Awards and they don't go. And it gives a lane for some of the lesser known entertainers to have an opportunity, right? So somebody like a Tone Stith is never going to be invited to be on the main stage at the Grammys, sadly. I'm not trying to speak that over his career, but Soul Train Awards will be a place that will welcome him with open arms, right? The VMAs, they don't even like music. They just need the controversy. So you don't know who's going to show up over there. But yeah, I just think I'd love to have a show that's performance-based. I think the Monique show was that for a minute. And she was really good at not only featuring current artists, but artists from different eras. So Jodie Watley would be on there. Angela Winbush would be on there. SWV would be on there. The Time would be on there. All these different folks who we hadn't seen in years would be. I think Freddie Jackson might have even been on there at some point. So you had all these greats on their show. We need more outlets like that. I do appreciate the people on YouTube who make that kind of content. I really love the Black Music Archive channel. They make some really great videos. If you want to learn about voice, singing technique, all of that, he posts some really great content about like how singers perform, like what's a light lyric soprano versus a mezzo soprano. And he also posts a lot of like vintage concerts that exist. Another channel I really like, of course, I think the Terrell show is really good. He brings his is centered on vocalists. So you get a lot of vocalists who come on there and sing their hearts out. And it's definitely been a space to introduce people to a lot of really talented people that we would have never seen because radio won't push them. The networks don't show music, but they don't push them. And even the labels don't really push them. What's another one? I'm also a big Michael fan still. I like watching the Detail channel. That's more so just history, but I love that channel. They talk everything about the Jacksons. As a Prince fan, there's a channel, Violet Reality. They don't make as many videos anymore, but if you're heavy into Prince, all things Prince, that was a great channel. I love the Real Black channel. That's kind of more so that just celebrates all things of Black culture. So it's Black sitcoms, movies, concerts, it's so many different things. So that's a really great one. What else do I like to look at? I'm kind of a dork too, because I'll be watching all the science stuff. I told you guys one of my favorite channels is like Bright Sun Films. It's this channel that dives into why certain companies or amusement parks failed and went bankrupt. And he just goes into all the details. And I think when he started it, he was like a 15-year-old kid. Like, it's a really great channel. I'm such a dork. I caught myself this morning watching the Smithsonian channel on TV. They have this show called Aerial America. And literally, Nothing happens on it. It's literally a drone or a plane that's just flying over a certain landscape, and the person is just illustrating what happened. So I watched this whole episode about Kansas, and the guy was like, they have 46 million acres of farmland in Kansas, and something where you will not find a mountain. And I'm just sitting here watching this thing for like an hour, just all into it. I was like, you know what? But I love like content that has something where you can gain something. You know what I mean? All right, I've been talking enough. Let me read some comments here. Why is my thing not loading? Oh, here it goes. All right. Pop-up video was my show, Dangerous Curves. That was one of the best shows. But you had to, that was reading comprehension practice. Because you had to read fast. Because you'd be watching the video and it'd be pop, pop, because like it would play a music video, a fact about the artist or the song would pop up on the screen. And sometimes it'd be like, and so you have to read as fast as you. In 1922, they had a single, but like you had to read so fast. So over time, you started to learn. But like VH1 had all the good shows, like Pop Up Video, before they were rock stars, greatest dance songs of the music, one hit wonders, two hit wonders, behind the music. There was just so much on there. Man, they had some really great shows. I had to learn so much. I think I've probably seen every behind the music, right? James Ingram is another one I don't think we talk about. People don't talk about Patrice Rushen as much. She is like genius. She even, I don't know how this happened, but even like with Janet, she was Janet's musical director for the Janet tour but something happened and I guess they fell out and she brought in another director. But Phyllis is amazing. She's done a lot of, even before Adam Blackstone kind of became the main person for a lot of these award shows, Patrice Rushen was the musical director for some of those BET awards and some of those award shows. She's an awesome instrumentalist and vocalist. Somebody said, I would love a Mary Wells doc. The thing that makes me sad about Mary Wells is that she died broke. I hate to hear that, I hate that that happens to so many who give their whole life to the art and they get exploited and they leave with nothing sometimes. Oh yeah, Diane Carroll, first Black woman to win a Tony for Best Actress in a Musical. She also looked really good when she passed on. She looked great for her age. I know she might have did a little work, but still, she still looked amazing. I think even if she didn't do whatever she did, she was still gonna look good. Melba Moore is great, especially in theater. I think the reason Melba just didn't blow up, there's a certain collective of R&B artists that came from theater in the late 70s, going into the early 80s. And so as they got these record deals, the labels wanted to push them as distinguished artists, which was great. But the problem was, as you saw the emergence of a BET and MTV and VH1, they didn't want distinguished, especially MTV. It was like, what can we push to the young folks? And so I think she just never got that support from radio and that support from like the major networks. BET did what they could do, but also understand in the early times, BET didn't just play music videos. It was kind of like a culture channel. So yeah, they played music videos, but there was things about like healthy lifestyles and all these different things that affected us collectively. So there are some who unfortunately got left in the shadows where they just never quite got the opportunity to really blow up. But what I love about Melba Moore is that she knows that she's loved and she can still sell out any venue. So that's pretty dope. Saida Garrett. Oh, she follows me on Twitter. If Twitter's still gonna be here next week. Saida Garrett, she wrote Man in the Mirror for Michael. She's also on I Just Can't Stop Loving You. Let's see. Somebody said Versus, LOL, that didn't last long. The flaw with Versus is what they let the money start talking. They wanted to exploit it. People just wanted to chop it up and enjoy music. And then it became this corporate event. They got to have the Doritos bowl on the stage. They got to have the bottle of Ciroc, which pisses me off because somebody should have been watching Shaka Khan that night. I was so excited about that when the Shaka came out feeling good. Okay. Yeah. If y'all don't know, Shaka is one of my absolute favorite entertainers. All right. I appreciate Stephanie Mills for kind of having her back and ensuring that Shaka would not be perceived the way that people were trying to make her out to be. But yeah. Yeah. Oh, Lisa Fisher. Lisa Fisher is in that 20 Feet from the Stardom documentary as well. I remember Video Soul came on back on. Oh, I remember Video Soul came back on Tubi. Okay, that's cool. Selena John. Oh yeah, Selena out of Chicago. Like, yeah, she's really not appreciated, and she has a beautiful tone. Beautiful tone. Um, yeah, I think the only song she had that really had a shot was like "Guess What," and her being on Kanye's "All Falls Down." But she's always in good voice. If you've seen her live, really great voice. Um, Somebody said I saw Shaka this past July at Winter Park, Colorado. She was so much better. Yeah, I saw her last fall. It was such a good. It's crazy how she still has that much power in her voice. Because even as you get older, your voice will deteriorate a little bit just because it comes with age. Shaka is still hitting some of these notes from 74 like it's nothing. Like she don't even be trying. She just it's just way up there. I'm like, how do you do that? Right? That's amazing. Angie Stone. Um, yeah, with Sequence. Remember, she was in Sequence, the rap group first. I have that vinyl at my mom's house because my dad gave me all his vinyls when I got to high school because he was like, I know you'll appreciate them. So he just had crates and crates and crates and crates and crates. And I just remember I saw the vinyl and it said like Sugar Hill Records. So I thought it was like a Sugar Hill thing. And I didn't realize like Sugar Hill Records had additional artists outside of Sugar Hill. So I'm getting ready to put this on thinking I'm going to hear a hip, up, a hip, and I put that on. I heard doom, 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 doom. I was like, hey, this is, hey, what is this? So, yeah, then of course Angie Stone. Then she was in Vertical Hold. You know, it seems you're much too busy for me. Like she was on that group, and then of course she had the solo career. Angie has some good gems. Um, I love "I Wish I Didn't Miss You Anymore." I love that song. Um, "Funk You Right On Up." That was the name of the song. Thank you, James Grayton II. First female rap act to get certified. Yeah. Kim Burrell makes some great music. She might just want to stop talking so much, and she'll be all right. She always third. She always got some drama going. Always got some drama going. Keep Kim. We want to hear your beautiful voice. Stop shaking the table so much. Um, Kiki Wyatt's vocals are yeah. Now I do want Kiki to learn some new songs. I'm not gonna lie. She has this voice out of this world, but you know when she gets there, it's gonna be if only you knew. Like 300 of them, great. But add something else to the roster too. And she had a really great EP that came out 2013, 2014. There was this wonderful song called "Lie Under You" that I love. It's a country record, like kind of like bluegrass. It's a beautiful song, great vocal, and it's very simple. It's melodic. It's very calming. It kind of reminds me of like a Tweet smoking cigarettes or like an Anthony Hamilton. Um, the point of it all. It kind of gives me that same energy. Yes, I really love Kiki. I saw her once. Yeah, again, I don't know how and then they always say when women have babies, they lose an octave. I don't think she lost any because she got as many kids as Nick Cannon. Only she's with all hers, but she still got all them notes. So I don't know how they do it. Um, No More Tears, my favorite Anita Baker song. Anita, I need you to add a DC date. I'm cool driving to Baltimore, but gas be high. Can you come to DC? Just come on to I don't know, Lincoln Theater, Warner Theater, MGM. Come on down. You can come across the 45 minutes, please. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, Anita don't be playing no game. She has no time for nonsense. She is quick to shut something down. Um, Jill Scott. I think Jill Scott is heavily appreciated. I think because she kind of came out during the neo soul movement, she was able to still have success. Like who is Jill Scott? I think went triple platinum. Beautiful things, words and sounds. I think that went platinum and a half. The real thing went gold. It's probably closer to like 700,000 copies by now. Light of the Sun was a #1 album. So Jill, I think, has had success because she came out at a time when they were still kind of pushing neo soul acts. So Erica was able to enjoy that wave. Jill was able to enjoy it. India Ari, D'Angelo, Maxwell, Amp Fiddler more so in the UK. Music Soul Child. Who else? I'm skipping some people. Hill Street Soul, Kendrick the Family Soul. I'm skipping some people. It'll come to me later. But yeah, there were a lot that Lucy Pearl. So I think there were a lot that were able to successfully have some commercial success. Oh, somebody said I'm glad Coco Jones is finally getting her due. Her album has some bops. I haven't heard it yet. I know it just came out Friday, but she's the woman that's on Bel Air. She's playing Hillary. Yeah, she's really talented. I did see the clip of her singing "I Get Lonely" at that showcase. She killed that. It's a great one. Angela Bofield's another good one, y'all. I hate that she had the strokes, but you know what's funny? You all see the clip where It's the night Michael wins all them Grammys. Either it was the Grammys or it was the AMAs. He won a whole bunch of Grammys. We know that, but I think at the AMAs he won like 7 that night as well. But he wins the award. Angela Bofield is the presenter. Michael kisses her on the cheek. She almost died. She was blushing so hard. Like I think she was in heat over Michael that night. I was like, "Go on, Angela, let it all out." Man, somebody said Deborah Cox and Heather Headley. Yeah, Deborah's smart. Deborah realized she could have a viable career doing house music once the R&B slowed down, and also doing theater. Who was the other person I didn't see? I skipped. Oh, Heather Headley. She's smart too. I wish I wasn't. There's another one I really like. In My Mind. I think she does some other behind the scenes work too. Regina Bell's another one. Baby Come to Me. Vivian Green. I really enjoyed her second album. People love Emotional Roller Coaster, but I really loved Gotta Go. I thought that was a great song. The only thing that sucked though, I remember when it dropped, I knew it wasn't going to do that well because by then the industry was changing. That was out around the same time as like Tamia dropping Officially Missing You, and I was like, dang, that's not going to really be a big hit either because the industry's shifting and these aren't the songs they're going to push and support anymore. But amen for R&B radio. Okay, Rest, yeah, with the locks. I don't know where she's at. I have no idea. I like Deion Ferris too. Okay, guys, I'm going to wrap this up because I have a lot to do for the next 2 weeks. Y'all pray my strength. I'm exhausted just thinking about it. As far as, because some people are asking when will we get to see the short film, it's going to be a minute. We're going to film it and then it goes into post-production. There's a lot of I's that need to be dotted, T's that need to be crossed. We're going to try to push this into the film festival market. And I think with the film festival market, there's certain rules where you can't put anything out yet. So most likely, if we get an opportunity to upload it here, it wouldn't be until after the spring because, we're trying to get it into as many doors as possible. But I'm really excited about it. We tried the best that we could do to incorporate as much of the podcast episode as we could, but we also changed a lot of things and added some new bits and pieces because, again, it's a short film, so we can't do 48 minutes like the podcast. It has to be a lot shorter, but I think it's going to be really funny. I'm not in it, okay? I'm too old to play my teenage self. Maybe if I shave and maybe gain like 5 pounds in the face, I can maybe still look a little youthful, but no, I think I'd be too old. So we have a whole cast that's playing all these different people. We've changed the names. It's going to be a lot of fun. Anyway, this has been so much fun. You guys are the best. We always have some really, really great combos. Oh, hold on, wait a minute. I'm gonna answer this question before I go to bed. Talking about black versus white voices, what do you think about Celine Dion and Adele's voice? Celine has power. Adele has tone, but there's no power behind Adele's voice. And I think that's why Adele sadly has yet to complete a full world tour without canceling shows, or why we've seen her have performances and her voice goes out. Amazing tone, but I think there's some people who are just lighter vocalists and their voices are not meant to be heavily projected all the time in 200 city tours. It can tear the voice down. And I think for Adele, that's a challenge she struggles with. Also, when artists lose weight, their voice also changes. And so it'll be interesting to see how the Vegas residency goes because a lot of times, if you're somebody of a larger size, your lungs have a different kind of capacity. So as you lose the weight, the muscle there's a certain muscle you have to keep exercising as you lose the weight. If you don't, you do lose a little bit of that range. That's why like Jennifer Holliday, as she slimmed down, there was a portion where her voice wasn't as strong as it was. And now she was able to kind of rebuild it, but that's one of the things that happens. Celine, I thought, yeah, Celine, she was great. She's great. Her voice is not what it once was, but that just comes with age. But I always thought she was a great vocalist. Celine be singing. And Celine got like 30 albums. So I have no smoke for Celine. All right. Anyway, this has been great, guys. I am going to bed. Stay safe, stay sane. Hopefully I will see you guys hopefully before December. I'm going to try my best to have something uploaded, but like I said, I'm going to really be all over the place for a little bit. All right. Anyway, good night. Thanks, guys. I'll see you guys later.